We've got copies of the agenda back on that cart there. If you would like one, we've got three major items on the agenda. Just as a reminder for anybody who might not have been to one of our meetings before, this is a work session, so our procedure is a little more informal. This isn't a regular business meeting where we make decisions. Typically, this is an opportunity for discussion, giving direction to staff, and then regular business meetings, most of these items will come back to us for final approval at that time. So a little more informal process. There'll be plenty of opportunity for public comment. Before we get to that, there'll be an opportunity for public comment on each item when we get to those items. But we'll also have an opportunity at the very beginning of the meeting and also at the end if you'd want to comment on anything that's not on our agenda as well. So before we do that, and before I raise one issue about our agenda and the order, I just want to offer our congratulations to Brady Allison. Brady is the silver medal winner in individual men's archery and bronze for team archery. I think this is his fourth Olympics where he has medaled. Just an amazing accomplishment from Billings, Montana. So congratulations to him and to his family. And Chris challenged him to an archery match when he gets back. I'm not betting on Chris, I'll just say. So. Okay, with that, one item about the agenda, we have a request from Wyeth to move up or move back our subdivision regulation updates, item number 2, to the end of our agenda. We know that that's going to have the most discussion. We don't expect the item number 3, the Unified Work Program, to take too long, and that will allow Laura to go home and not have to wait till the wee hours of the night, heaven forbid. So we'll address that issue after Chris's report, if he's got any preliminaries, and I'll look to the council and see whether that's a change you want to make. So, but with that, Chris, anything in the way of preliminaries before we get into item number 1?
Yes, Mayor, I've just got a couple of items, but first along the sports theme, though Mr. Zeller tells me he's on vacation, I'm worried that he's interviewing somewhere for a coaching gig since his Little League team won the state championship. So we can congratulate Andy when he gets back and the kids from Billings for cleaning up and winning state here about 10 days ago. So that was really fun for Andy and for the kids. A couple of items I just wanted to flag that in the weekly report, there was semi-annual reports from Public Works and Parks. Hopefully well worth your time to take a look at. So just want to flag those for you. A lot of time goes in there, a lot of really good information. And then the last item that I have is Jennifer DeRay is here tonight to give an update on how things are coming relative to utility billing and some of the challenges we've been having with the software conversion. So I'll ask Jennifer to take the podium here before we turn it back over to you, Mayor.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background as to why we're having so many problems before I go into where we are and where we need to go. So our billing system, I know a lot of people think that billing is just easy, where you just send bills out. It should be really simple, but it's actually the most complicated system or software that the city has. And this software needs to integrate with 6 different other softwares, because we have, Routeware, we have our pay software, we have GIS and all these different softwares that it's integrating with. Very complex. And there had been some minor issues with integrating with some of these vendors. It's a lot of things to coordinate. That's been a minor issue though. Our biggest issue in the whole process really is the data that came out of our current system going into the new system. And this has been a problem with our system all along, and one of the reasons we wanted to convert. So we in Public Works never were able to get data out of our system. So we could not get our own data out of our system. IT could get it out, but we could give IT the same parameters 3 different times, and they'd give us 3 different sets of data, because it's just so hard to get data out of this system. Simpleris, who's the franchise fee kind of mediator in between, the one that's settling all that, they called our data in that case horrendous. So I think our new vendor would probably agree. And so that's been a lot of our problems, is getting that data to go over, and it caused all kinds of problems in the new system. And then what happened is then bills backed up, and their system is meant to bill and get bills out. And so the more bills that were backed up, the more that Vertex, our vendor, was actually manually manipulating everything for us to get the dates right, to get everything out the door. So that's been the problem so far and why it's taken so long. We had some programming issues. There's always going to be issues during a conversion, so some different things that happened, and I won't go into all those because, again, those are some minor problems that we encountered along the way. And probably our last issue that we've had was we have a very small staff to work with. And we've had a billing manager who worked, I think, 32 hours straight one day and the next. They're working every weekend, they're working nights. It's just a very small group to get this out. I'm not saying we need more people. I'm saying we need more people for the conversion itself. But going forward, we're staffed appropriately. It's just there was so much to do for this conversion because of so many data issues causing so many issues with the bills. So where we should be right now is that we should have billed, and just for a little bit more background, we bill in cycles. So we have 4 cycles, 4 basic cycles. We have I think 16 different total cycles, but 4 main water cycles. And the first cycle that we should have billed out on the new system was cycle 1. And that usually goes the second week of the month. Cycle 3 is cycle 2 is the second or the third week, and so on. So we should have billed cycles 1 through 3 entirely to date, and by the end of this week, we should be billing cycle 4. Where we are was we sent out cycles 1 through 3, except for those bills that have exceptions. We sent cycle 4 just late as I was leaving there tonight to come over here. Sent that over to our print vendor. It should go out in the mail tomorrow and on the portal. So we're caught up except for exceptions, but we should already be working on the next set of bills. So far, we have billed $36,900 for June bills, and we have 7,389 exceptions. So the exceptions are partly high usage that we have to work through one by one. And a lot of them are not necessarily high usage. Vertex is going to have to reset some of the parameters because it's kicking out some into high usage that shouldn't be. And then some are truly high usage but correct, but we have to manually look through all those. And most of the others are data issues where a bad date went in and it's kicking out an error. So they have to manually look through all those. So that's what they're working on. I had a meeting with Vertex this morning. Their recommendation is, because what's happening right now is that the delays that we have are causing all these cascading effects. So the bills, since they're meant to go out right away and all the reads are still coming in, it's convoluting all the bills and continuing to do this manual process. And we don't think we're ever going to catch up unless we get all the rest of the bills out as soon as we can. And what that means, though, for the customer, which they're not going to like, is that we're going to have to send the next bills out as a lot of 60-day bills. So it will encompass 2 months to get those bills out the door. What will happen with residential, because residential is on that tier system, and so to avoid kicking them into a higher tier, we'll double the tiers. So they'll have double the amount of time to get there and billed for the double amount of time. So overall, they will get billed for the same amount that they would have. It'll just be on one bill. And I know that's not going to be a popular choice of action, but it is the only way I see out of what we have going on right now. So what questions can I answer?
Yeah, Jennifer, I think the obvious one is, can you get more help if that is a choke point in the system? Is there anything that can be done about that? And Councilman Kennedy had a question, Councilman Boyette, and Councilman Rowan.
So Vertex has their people on it and is manually working on some of our bills. We would have to completely train somebody to be able, because there's a lot of people that have offered different help in different ways. But we would really have to completely train somebody in our billing and the old system and the new system in order to get somebody there. So we don't think that's a good option. IT offered any services that they could possibly provide today. And we tried to think of some of those. I was just talking, we have Damon from IT here. I think that they can help us with the storm portion, because remember, we also have storm coming on in July. So we think that he could maybe help us with a spreadsheet there. But other than that, we think we have the people on it that can be on it. They are about to hit a wall, though, so we need to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kennedy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, Chris, the big thing is the public. And the public went by kind of in the dark for the last month, wondering where their bill was and things like that. How are you going to get out exactly what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how it's going to affect the customer? Because I think that's the most important piece. You can get all the people and get it around and things like that, but the customer needs to know what they should be expecting, and very soon.
Sure. So we have done a news story. We've updated our webpage with frequently asked questions to explain everything, and we've been posting on Facebook. There has been nothing on Facebook for the last week or so, but we will get that updated. We didn't have a direction that we were going at that point, but we will get that updated. There's been a lot of people that have called. I would say 98% of the people that call in and actually talk to somebody are very understanding and understand, okay, I'll just budget for that. I know it will be coming. I will just budget for that. The ones that are not so understanding seem to be on Facebook. So,
Do you think you could do a snail mail mailing to the folks just to let them know?
we could. We did a mailing telling everyone that the system was coming, and I bet half the people have told us that they never opened it. So it seemed like that didn't go very far. We could try something like that. We just sent out, I think it was about 800 letters to some people that were on auto pay to explain how that was going to work. We've sent out letters specifically to people who are on budget billing and got kicked off the first month, how that was going to work. We can do a mass mailing. I just don't know how effective it will be.
Thank you. Councilor Boyette and Owen?
Thank you, Mayor. That was my question. I typically get an email that says your payment will be taken out 2 weeks from now. I've never received anything as far as an email. How much money are we behind the city? $1 million, $2 million, $5 million because we haven't collected funds?
Yeah, I would estimate about $3 million in revenue.
Then when will the auto debit, will that come back?
Yes, so the way that the auto payments work is if you get your bill and it had a due date that was in the past, it will not be taken out until your next due date. And it will be taken out at that time for the amount of the bill. So if you want to mitigate that, you can pay the additional, just estimate a payment instead of waiting for that bill to be taken out, because it's going to take out from your bank account whatever is due that day. But if your bill is in the future, then those bills are taken out as normal. There was also an issue on those first bills where it didn't indicate if it was auto pay or not like it used to, and that has been fixed now.
Okay.
We did send an email to everyone, or not an email, a letter to everyone that had an auto pay date that is on auto pay and had a due date that was in the past.
And I didn't get mine. I pay for 14 homes, and that's why I was asking.
I will verify that one.
Thank you. Councilor Brown, Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. I think my questions are sort of in the same general vein. I think at least the concern that I see and that I hear is not that when people get through, they don't get a satisfactory answer. I think they generally do. It's they can't get through. So do we need a call center type approach? Does the automated message need to change and, direct them to a website for information about this specific billing cycle? Like, I think people are not getting through, and that's fielding their frustration.
Okay, we can look at both, changing our, because we do have a number that it goes into, and then you can press a button to get where you need to go, but we can
Exactly.
change that message to include something else about seeking more data, and maybe that would eliminate some of those phone calls, but we can also look at reallocating some of our administrative staff to answering phones.
I think that might help. And so, Mayor, I just kind of have a follow-up for Chris, actually. It sounds like Public Works is doing what they can, but this frustrates a tremendous amount of people. And then a few weeks ago, there was this sort of notice that I felt was a little slip through that we might have overcharged a whole bunch of people on their parking tickets, and that they have to go through sort of a complicated process to apply to get refunds. So we are struggling to bill on the one hand and perhaps over collecting on another. And I'm concerned we're creating a general public perception that we're mismanaging their dollars. And so I just want to flag this to your attention that I think this is problematic. I'm not clear why we can't just refund money that we may have over-collected, but I think generally we're creating this sensation that maybe we're not able to do the basics. And I don't think that's true, but I can see where these messages start to collide into a narrative that doesn't reflect the work of the city staff very well. And I just want to put that on your radar screen. When we talk next week about parking fees, I'm going to want to come back to this overcharging topic, but I really hope that you as the city administrator can help us sort of calm the public's concerns about these things that happen to be totally independent but happening at the same time.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. First, I know you guys are working hard to get this resolved, and I think I was talking to Great Falls. They were going similar type thing, conversion, have all kinds of problems with the conversion, and so you're doing what you can do. But I would say this is same along the lines of everyone else. In the customer service industry, you want to over communicate, because the more you do in different ways. So postcards are very quick and easy. Make it very something that's very noticeable to let them know that, there's a delay in their billing, something like that. Just make sure you're over communicating, because then the public will understand it. That's a great idea. Anytime you call a company and they have an issue, an outage, suddenly there's a message saying, if you want to talk about this, it'll direct you to that. So those are the kind of things that we need to over communicate to our customers, our citizens, to make sure that that's happening. So I do agree with that. So, but I have another message or a question for Chris. If this is a $3 million shortage, how are we doing? I mean, Andy's not here to answer this, but how is the city doing as far as reserves and be able to make sure there's enough money to fund some of these things going forward? Is it, sometimes we have to borrow money if we don't have the right kind of funds coming in. Are we getting to that point where we have to start borrowing to meet some of the bills?
I'm confident we're not, but I know Jennifer knows precisely the answer on the accounting side. But on the
great.
utilities, that would be the place where we have the most flexibility. So Jennifer, anything you could add?
Right, so it's in the solid waste, water, and wastewater funds, so split between those three. We do have plenty of reserves, especially in the water fund, because we have a big project coming, so we've been building up. So we have the reserves to handle this. We also have operating reserves just in case something like this happens.
Okay, and then I do have one more question, because there's such a delay in the billing, and often tenants pay the water bill, and then they move out, and then the city then converts it over to the landlord till a new tenant comes in. So how is the city going to handle that, where a tenant may move out and be off the bill, the new one signs up? How are you guys going to handle it? Are you going to start billing the landlord because that bill wasn't paid and now this tenant's gone, or will you write that off?
So the way it works right now is that a lot of landlords have landlord agreements with us. So what happens is if a tenant moves out, it automatically switches into the landlord's name, and they're responsible for that bill. They do that so that they don't have to pay that turn-on fee every time. The ones that don't, we bill the person that was there, not the landlord.
I guess I'm not clear now. So right now they're back billed about 2 months, right?
Correct.
So if someone moves out today, then the landlord's going to get the bill for the 2 months past due?
The landlord would, if the landlord agreement said that they were responsible for the bill. If they don't have a landlord agreement, then no, it goes to
So
the
we're going to
tenant.
bill the landlords for stuff because we're past due on the, we haven't been able to bill the tenant for it. I don't think that's the right way to approach that. But,
I'm not sure that I'm completely understanding because we would be billing the landlord for only what they're responsible for.
okay, so the tenant moves out today, then you're going to send the bill to the tenant, not the landlord.
If they move out today, it would go to the landlord. The landlord would know that it's going into his name.
Yeah, and so then he's going to be billed for those 2 months that haven't been paid.
No, he'd be billed
That
for this point forward.
From this point forward?
Right.
Okay, so the past due billing will not be sent to the landlord?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Ripsis, and then council will ask for a motion on the agenda issue. Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. And this might be more for Chris. Jennifer, I've done a lot of these system data conversion projects in the past, and you're right, there always is some type of issue. But this was undoubtedly a failure of whatever data conversion strategy was set up. This should have been tested and known well before we went live, and most likely the conversion pushed in order to make sure that this didn't happen in the first place. So you're not going to be the next system conversion, but somebody in the city is, Chris. So after this is all done and you're doing exactly the right thing, just focusing on getting everything cleaned and caught up and everything, but very quickly after everybody catches their breath, there needs to be some type of postmortem saying this is where this failure happened and why it happened, so that the next time one of these comes across, whether it's police or public works or parks or whoever, it doesn't matter. We've got that learning in-house so that the next conversion goes much more smoothly. This is something that should have been foreseeable and preventable.
So I just want to address that briefly. So we did push the conversion by 6 months. And we have been tracking the lessons learned because obviously there's some mistakes along the way, and we've been tracking those so that we can go over those at the end. But we could have waited another 6 months and we still wouldn't have better data out of our current system to give them. We tested and tested and tested, and waiting longer was getting us nowhere.
Okay, very good. Thank you, council. Thank you, Jennifer, and your staff. Good luck. Council, before we open up for public comment on other items, Councilmember Boyette.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to move number 3 to number 2 and number 2 to number 3 for our meeting this evening.
Second, Councilmember Kennedy. Any discussion? If not, if all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, that's done. So we'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity to comment on anything that's on our agenda. If you can't wait until we get into those individual items, or if you got something that's not on our agenda.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. So while that's getting passed out, this is the consultant's report from the TIF board for tomorrow night's meeting. And what I highlighted there is number 2. It says Collaborative Designs completed the project of the Sportsplex. It says the new proposal we presented at the August 6th Sabura board meeting. If approved, the Sabura board will present to the Billings City Council work meeting on August 9th. That's Friday. And the regular council meeting on August 16th. So do you have a meeting on August 9th of a work study to do the complex?
We don't, Kevin. My guess is our next one is the 19th. It's the 5th today, plus 14 would be the 19th. That'd be my guess. That's probably what they're thinking about, but I haven't had any discussion with them. Maybe Chris, do you know, is that on our 19th agenda or was?
There's nothing on there except the South Park Aqua study.
Okay. Okay, Chris, do you have any information on that?
Yes, the Sabura has asked to go on a future work session discussion. So whether it's I'm sorry, looking at the calendar, whether it's the 19th, I know either the 19th or the September 2, they're trying to get in front of the council as soon as possible.
And not determined at this point, is that correct?
On 19th, I believe it's on the draft agenda.
Okay, very good. Go ahead. Anything else?
So I mean, I just wanted to check, they do have a track record of being a little off once in a while down there. You know, so you want to double check their work. And if you look behind it, I mean, this isn't anything to do with that, but it says South 24 TIF budget. Jeff indicated, that would be Jeff Muir, I would presume, and then you flip it over to the 24 budget, and here we have the meetings for an $8,000 allocation. Well, that's directly to him. So you would think they would have the ethical duty for him just to step aside, says, hey, I've got an ethical issue. I'm not going to vote on the budget because I get paid out of that budget for my meeting room expenses. They do have an ethical policy in their memorandum of understanding. You think they'd sort of live up to it. In this last 30 seconds, you know, this whole deal the other night with the meeting minutes. A lot of that could have been resolved. They never post the agenda to the website, so you have no idea what it says. You expect the public to get up prior to even hearing their discussion or their presentation and make public comment. And then they get up 3 hours later and make the presentation, but you have no opportunity because it's not a public hearing. So you're stuck with trying to assume what they're going to say, and that really denies the people's right to effectively participate in decisions of a $450,000 expenditure. That really, you really deny anybody that wanted to come down would just be, you couldn't do it because you wouldn't know what was going to get said. So I think we need to somehow change this a little bit. But here we have the 9th. They can't even read a calendar, and you're going to turn them loose on a $70 million sportsplex? I mean, that would be a little concerning to me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Marcel Brewski, and I'm the Senior Director of Engagement at Big Sky Economic Development. And earlier, thank you, City Administrator, handed out a flyer to you all. Big Sky Economic Development, under our workforce development program, Billings Works, is working with a company called DCI, Developers Council International, to do a talent attraction and retention research project. So it's been done in 3 phases. Phase 1 is target market identification. Phase 2 is perception research. And phase 3 is a results and talent workshop. And that's what I would like to invite you all today to attend next Tuesday, August 13th at the Billings Public Library from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. Patients with DCI will be in town to go through all of the findings, and then us as the Billings community, business owners, education partners, hopefully you all and others will be there to really take in that research and decide what do we as a city, as Billings, want to do with that information moving forward. We use Better Off in Billings as our talent attraction and retention brand at Big Sky Economic Development, so we foresee some of our messaging changing, and I think we had a call with DCI, just a pre-call last week, and the research findings were very interesting, and I think Billings has a really unique opportunity to move forward together with businesses, education partners, of how we attract and retain our talent in our community. And that's all I have. So thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. Good luck. Next.
Mr. Mayor, Honorable Council, my name is Paul Roberts. I'm a property owner at 2416 Wyoming Avenue here in Billings. And we've been there about 45 years. I'm a retired Billings police officer. And over the last 45 years, we've noticed more and more traffic on Wyoming Avenue between 24th and 25th. People will tend to miss the light by turning onto Wyoming, going up to 25th, turn left and go over to Broadwater. What we're suggesting is a thing to kind of keep the traffic down for kids in the neighborhood that are playing in the street and whatever. And what we're suggesting is maybe portable barricades put across Wyoming where it intersects 24th Street. That way, if we have a need of construction or fire or ambulance or whatever, those barricades could be moved aside and access granted, but it would stop general public from traveling through that portion of the intersection. I have several other people who would like to speak on this also.
Good evening. My name's Dennis Shear. I live at 803 25th Street West on the corner of Wyoming and 25th. And I agree with Paul, everything he said there. We've lived there, this is my wife Joyce, 30, 31, 32 years, and we've noticed a fair amount of more traffic coming through, cutting the light at Broadwater and 24th. And there's a lot of kids in our neighborhood now. And it just seems to me, over the years we lived there, there's a lot more traffic and they're coming around, cutting the corner. And it just seems like we need something done to stop that flow, to cut the light. There's a lot more kids in our neighborhood now. And I even went out and bought some little kids at play sign and put them up and down our side, and then some of the neighbors put some signs on the other side. And it kind of slows them down a little bit, but their main concern is to beat the traffic. And with all those new little kids in our neighborhood, I'm just waiting for something to happen, because I'm right on a corner there. I can see a lot. But anyway, I'm just here to support the petition. So thank you.
Joyce Shear, also at 803 25th Street West, just standing to support the petition as written.
Thank you. Next.
I'm Brittany Brester. I live at 2501 Wyoming, right across the street from Joyce and Dennis. I have lived there for about 30 years. I've moved in there when I was 2 years old, and I now live there with my family, with my husband and 3 children. 2 of those children are very small. They're 7 and 8. Me as a parent, I teach my kids, keep an eye out for traffic, look both ways for crossing the street, and there are times where my kids are out there playing, and there are cars that go very fast through there, not looking. Currently, right now, there's just 2 yield signs on Wyoming, and a lot of times people will just blow through the yield signs, not even pay attention. So I would be in support of the barricades. If the barricades cannot be passed, I would also like to propose a 4-way stop and potentially have those stop signs that have the flashing lights around them, like what's up on 6th and Lewis, just to get their attention more, because there was a period of time where there wasn't a lot of children in the neighborhood, and now there are quite a few, and I do see something bad happening, and I would hate to see that happen, especially to my own children, being there on the corner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Maggie Roberts, and thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tom and Mike, for coming out and observing. Also, I want to thank, I don't believe he's here tonight, Dakota. He called me, and he already has strips set up on the streets. But the biggest problem over the years, especially these last 5 years, we have seen people avoiding the signal light and coming through. Not only that, but we have people with stolen vehicles or something that they decide to dump and leave. The 2400 block of Wyoming has become almost like a parking lot. I'm not kidding. Some of them will park there, walk across 24th Street to that mini little shopping area over there. Instead of going over there and parking, they park in ours. But we have 12 to 15 children, small children, riding scooters, bicycles, whatever. And we don't have sidewalks up and down like most of the other areas have. And so the kids are out in the street. They're being kids, they're praying. And I would like for each one of you to think about this. If it was your child or your grandchild or your parent getting out of a vehicle and somebody comes around, because I have almost seen one of these kids hit by somebody coming through, and it's very dangerous. And I'm really supportive of these barriers that can be moved if there is an emergency situation. They're easily moved. but I would really appreciate if you all would truly think about this. But I really appreciate everything that's been done, and you'll see all of our signatures. I'm at 2416 Wyoming. I'm right in the middle. And I'm the chairperson for our neighborhood watch. So I'm sorry, I'm a nosy neighbor. I'm always watching. So I'm always watching these kids, and I'm a grandma and a great grandma, and I don't want to see anybody hit, paralyzed for life, or killed. I don't want to see it happen. So I really appreciate if you'll really think seriously about how we can make this street, the 2400 block of Wyoming, safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Any other public comment before we close it this period? Okay, we'll close the public comment, and I'll just comment that your timing for the people interested in the 24th and Wyoming situation is very good, because we have our Public Works Director with us tonight and our city engineer, and I would encourage you to communicate with Public Works and the city engineering office. I don't want to pass the buck, but I'll pass the buck. We do look for expertise from the experts on that sort of issue. So Mac, would you just raise your hand? That's Mac Ferguson, our city engineer, and Debbie Melling in the back, our Public Works Director. So they heard everything you had to say, and I'm assuming that they'll be thinking about this, or you can communicate with them. So timing is good. Okay, we'll move on then to first item on our agenda. We have Steve Simonson from Billings Association of Realtors. He's going to introduce some experts who we have with us from Consultants for Real Estate, and tell us what's up. Steve, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Cole, members of council and staff. I just wanted to give a shout out and thank the city for allowing us access to not only leadership, but to staff members as well. The Realtor Association is very concerned about the loss of entry-level housing in our community, and hopefully the team this week will have an opportunity to come up with some solution-based answers. And this time I'd like to turn it over to Wendy Tim, the leader of the consulting group. So Wendy, would you please come up and introduce the team?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I've had a head start meeting with some of you today. Our team did, starting early this morning with Council Member Owen. We are all counselors of real estate. It's a 60-year-old organization of real estate professionals. We're actually international now, invitation only, and we have been collectively members for decades and come from various disciplines within the real estate world, development, finance, valuation, brokerage, lots of actually professionals such as CPAs and professional consulting firms. And tonight, I'd like to introduce the team that is here, boots on the ground all week. We have Mark Reiling, who resides in Minneapolis, with a very strong background in all things commercial real estate, as well as development. Next to him is Mike Christensen. He is a resident of Salt Lake City and can tell you what your house is worth, but can also tell you what a community's worth. So he is a very experienced gentleman in the valuation arena. Next to him is Roger Sherman. He is from Los Angeles, and he is an architect with Gensler. They're the largest architecture firm actually in the country, and he heads up their affordable housing design group. Next to him is Samantha DeCoven. Samantha works for the Counselors of Real Estate in our home office in Chicago. And the consulting core is her baby. She runs it for us. We do about 5 assignments a year, And you're right, it's a very good honor that the Billings Association of Realtors was able to get a grant from their parent, the National Association of Realtors. It was very competitive, and they made quite a compelling presentation to us. So she's coordinating this and will be very involved with our final report, which is of course published and public. And hopefully that will be coming out in the next, within 60 days. And then lastly, we have Dana Rowan, who is in Boston. We have to get the East Coast in here and the West Coast. And he has a background in all things development and ownership as well. And I am based in Colorado after a 45-year career in St. Louis. I was actually head of a planning commission there. And I am a housing developer that has developed lots of different types of housing, mostly high density. So we are just delighted to go north, south, west, and east in your fine community. And you know, they talk about think tanks. We're a do tank. So we are hoping to provide you with a meeting implementation plan and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Much appreciated. We look forward to what you come up with, and if we can help in whatever way, we want to do that. Steve, Chris, any of the members of the group, anything else on this? Okay.
Do not.
Okay. More to come. Steve?
Yeah, just a closing comment. Council's invited out to the Billings Association of Realtors. Friday morning at 9 o'clock, we're going to have a preliminary report out. You're all welcome to come and attend, and we really appreciate your efforts and help. And Tom was instrumental in the grant review that secured this for us, so thank you, Councilmember Rufus.
Hey, Steve, I'm going to be out of town on Friday. Is there any written version of the preliminary report? Is that purely going to be an oral discussion? If you know.
It'll be a PowerPoint presentation.
Great. If we could, if it's something that's distributable and you're willing to let it go, sure love copies, but understand if you want to hold on to it for a while too. So, okay. I don't know if we've got any questions for Steve before we move on to item number 2. Are there any questions? You look very tentative there, Councilmember. Go ahead.
Just a question as to whether for the team needs to have any, in terms of them gathering the information they need, I guess. Do they need to have any, talking to anybody who does development in town or a city council member?
Council member, we're looking at city, county, and state lands within the study this week, and so you're welcome to tag along anytime on the tour. I'd be happy to share that with the group. So, other questions?
Great. Anything else for Steve? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Cole.
Steve, thank you. And again, thank you. Consulting Corps made up of volunteers. So the fact that they would take an interest in our community on their nickel, their time is much appreciated. So thanks again. All right, thank you. That concludes item number, well, we need to have an opportunity for public comment. Is there any public comment on item number 1? Nobody's coming forward, so we'll close that public comment period. Thanks again. The new item number 2 is the old item number 3, our draft 2025 Unified Planning Work Program for our friends back in Washington, D.C. We'll turn it over to Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing us to go ahead of the subdivision regs. Rusty's here for me. I know we're having some technical issues, so it may not work. Rusty's here with me as well. He also presents on the UPWP for the transit side of things. And as soon as they get the presentation up, it's... Yep, you got it. Awesome. Oh. You can just push the, yeah, go ahead. Rusty clicker. There we go. So the Metropolitan Planning Organization has allocated transportation planning funds from the Federal Highway Administration yearly to conduct planning activities that are related to transportation. This occurs across the nation for populations of 50,000 or over. The work program is adopted annually by the Policy Coordinating Committee, which is made up of the mayor of the city of Billings, the Yellowstone County Board of County Commissioner Chairman, Planning Board President, and MDT. Those four entities make up the Policy Coordinating Committee. So this presentation has been given to the Planning Board, the County Commissioners tomorrow. You will receive the presentation tonight and act on it at your next regular meeting, and then PCC will act on it on August 20th. This does get reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of city county planning staff across the board, and they are recommending approval of the UPWP. There are 12 work elements in our UPWP. We request reimbursement through those 12 elements every quarter from federal highways. One thing that I will mention is starting last year, 2.5% of our PL funds must be set aside for safe and accessible transportation planning options. This is commonly referred to, we would probably call them complete streets elements. So we already do that, but we need to be able to document that we are setting aside a part of our PL funds. But we do it pretty much in every project or program we do. We look at those things. Our funding sources this year, we have the kind of four funding sources that make up our budget each year. Our planning department fees, which is zoning, subdivision, permitting like fence and signs. Same for Yellowstone County. And then we have our Yellowstone County planning mill levy that is generated. And then our federal PL funds came in at just a little over 1.1 million this year. That is down about $350,000, primarily because of the addition of the two new MPOs in the state, which is Bozeman and Helena. That gives us a total project funding this year of just a little over 2.2 million. In this situation, our UPWP runs on the federal fiscal year, which starts October 1st and runs through September. And again, this all has to be related to transportation planning in some way, and we'll demonstrate that here in the next couple slides. So just a little bit, kind of a breakdown of our work elements. You'll see each one of those has a PL funding amount to it, and then we also have to match that in some situations. The only elements that we do not have to match have to do strictly with 100% reimbursable through transportation elements, such as our transportation system, which is a lot of our technical side, so it's our traffic count program, those types of projects. Our transportation plan is 100% funded, as well as our transportation improvement program and our environmental considerations, and that's the breakdown that gives us our total. This is a comparison just from last year to this year. Overall, we received about the same amount of money in our PL funds as we did last year. The only difference that we really had was that we haven't had a lot of carryover. So what happens in, which we'll see in our next slide, is that we will have a certain amount of contingency funds left over that we're either not programming. We don't lose those. Those get rolled in and we receive those in 2 years. So we don't ever lose any federal PL money. It just gets rolled over. As I mentioned, the different work elements get a different percentage of federal funding, and then we match it with local. So obviously the transportation heavy objects are 100% funded, and then things like subdivision and zoning are funded at a little bit smaller percentage due to not as much transportation. There's transportation planning related in everything we do in planning. It's just at different levels. So obviously community planning and those types of things has a little bit higher. Subdivision has a little bit higher than zoning. Our citizen involvement is much higher. That will definitely come into play as we move forward with updating our neighborhood plans and those community plans. This is our man month table, and basically what it is, it takes each staff member and it adds up to 11 months with using the 12th month as our sick, vacation, that type of leave. And you will notice right there on the very right-hand side where we've added the new position of neighborhood planner that this council approved at our budget this year. So we are proposing to add that to our UPWP, and hopefully MDT and Federal Highways will get on board with that. We just recently had a FHWA MDT review of the MPO with transit. And one of the things we talked about was staffing, and we see this neighborhood planner really being able to not only assist with the neighborhood planning, but that transportation element, working with our transportation planner, if we ever hire one, to really move some of those elements along. Our 2024 priorities, right now we're about 85% into our PED bike plan. Complete the feasibility study for the 21st Street underpass, which I know is a priority for this council. We have tried to bid that project twice and have not got any nibbles on it. So we reevaluated the budget for that. Public Works did review the scope of work and felt that the scope was adequate and good. I think maybe our budget was just a little low for that. So that you'll see that in our 2025 priority as one of our big ones. And then to finalize the transportation planning elements in the West End and the Heights neighborhood plan. Again, these are our 2025 priorities. Again, the big one is to complete the feasibility study for the 21st Street underpass. We know that needs to get done, so we updated the budget. So I think we will definitely, I will have that RFP out October 1st, so to get that underway. Again, to finalize those transportation elements to the neighborhood plans. One of the things that came out of our federal highway review, we had a very good review. Our MPO runs very well. One of the things that did come out, there was a couple things. When we updated our 2023 long-range transportation plan, the Census Bureau still had not released the new urbanized boundary area for Billings. So our plan basically was in final approval, and they came out with a new boundary. And we determined, working with MDT, that we could wait till our next update. However, through our federal highway review, the priority and project list in the back of our LRTP has got some issues with it. It's a little bit hard to read. Some of the funding sources are not matching up. So one of the things that came out as a recommendation of that document was to review that project list. And we figured if we're going to do that, we're going to update our planning boundary to make sure that we're getting our accurate transportation planning funding dollars. I will tell you, it'll be interesting to look at that boundary because we are getting closer and closer to Laurel. I would imagine the next census, we could be the Billings Laurel Metropolitan Planning Organization because we're getting pretty close to their planning boundary. Some of the other elements in there are a little bit smaller projects that we could manage this year with our funding scenario. One was to update the mobile trail application that was done a few years ago. It needs to be updated to make sure that we have the adequate trail system and on-street and off-street connections shown on that app. We need to update our City of Billings Complete Streets Progress Report. That is a guideline within the Complete Streets policy that we do that every 3 years. We also are looking at bike share. We did a bike share feasibility study a few years ago, and some of the recommendations that came out of that was to work with a company so that we could control what happened with either scooters or bikes that came into the community. We need to do that. I mentioned the set aside for safe and accessible transportation planning options. And the final thing is we set aside a good chunk of money for travel demand modeling, and that is to support the City of Billings transportation master plan study that's going to be looking at roadway configuration and or with land use and how that might work. The MPO thought being able to bring travel demand modeling to the table to look at some scenario planning for if roadway decisions, changes were made, how that would affect the entire network and the system as we're moving through. And I think with that, I turn it over to Rusty to talk about transit.
Okay. Mayor and Council, good evening. The transit section of the UPWP is structured much the same as the highway side, separate elements with specific activities and functions outlined within each of those. Our reimbursement also occurs quarterly, and those amounts differ just depending on the projects and activities that we've undertaken for that quarter. Federal funding for this section is provided under FTA Section 5303, which is that multimodal planning in metropolitan areas. Pretty much mirrors the same requirements that are there for the highway side of the document. Local match on our portion of the funding is provided primarily through those local transportation mills, our advertising revenues, and then other applicable sources such as those entitlements, TransAid, things such as that. So this is a pretty basic breakdown, but you can see the elements up there that we undertake each year, ranging from administration through future service and current conditions within the system. Comparing between FY24 and 25, we do see a little bit of a decrease there from 386,000 down to 327,000 this year. Laura had touched on that previously. Primarily that's due to those other MPOs coming online and now that pot being split 5 ways instead of the 3 ways that it had previously been. We did see some increase with that bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed a couple of years ago, but now with the other MPOs coming online, we are pretty much operating back at those pre-BIL levels. One thing to note there in our program studies line at the bottom of the document there, we are carrying those funds over into FY25, and I'll touch on that in our priorities there for the 25 year. As far as transit goes, accomplishments in 2024, we primarily completed our required plan updates, including that Public Transit Agency Safety Plan, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and the Transit Asset Management Plans. Big accomplishment that we did execute that fixed route service overhaul, which included those 450 designated bus stop location assessments. We also implemented a new automated vehicle location system, which includes dispatching for our fixed route system and real-time tracking for customer usage. That did allow for integration with Google Maps that we recently announced. And in conjunction with that, we also received FTA certification for our automated passenger counting system. This is a system that's installed in each bus. They're digital counters that count ingress and egress into the vehicle, which provides us real-time data on bus load, but also demand usage for each and every stop along any given route. Another major undertaking that we are very near the completion of is the planning, development, and implementation of a third-party CDL testing program with the state of Montana to streamline the hiring process here at Met Transit, but we also worked with Public Works on this as well. We're in the final stages of the certification from the state of Montana to utilize the Met Transit site as a testing course. We're actually just waiting on DOJ to send down one of their testers to observe our testers in action before we're fully certified. So excited to see that coming to fruition. So as far as 2025 goes, this sustainability and governance study we had previously had programmed in FY24. We were just unable to actually get it underway, so we did move these funds forward. Primarily, this study is really focusing on, as the population continues to grow, how do we meet the demands of that growing population and increase the service of the system. The urbanized area for which all of our federal requirements are in effect for is more than just within the city limits of Billings. So we really need to understand how we can sustainably fund the transit system, as well as does the current model work the best for the growing area. As Laura had also mentioned, there's a very real possibility that Laurel could be grouped in with the next census group. And what that does, that kind of changes the conversation a little bit about transit, because Laurel has their own transit system currently in place under the rural operating requirements. But once those two urbanized areas join into one, now we all are kind of under that same umbrella together. So really understanding if we have that funding to ensure that we can continue providing services as that grows, but also once the potential of those entities joining together, what's that picture look like? Do we need some sort of interlocal agreements? Do we need other things such as that? So we want to be anticipatory about the situation as opposed to just reactionary. So the other portion of that is really what do we have for sustainable funding sources right now? Can we continue to anticipate existing local funding sources as well as those state sources? And then what additional sources can we find to help fund that system going forward? So it's really kind of a holistic, encompassing type of study. So we really want to give it the due diligence within this program this year. We also are looking at assessing the feasibility of a rapid transit line connecting Heights, downtown, and West End to try to decrease some of that passenger travel time. Primarily along with that, we'll be assessing potential future transfer locations. Primarily what I'm talking about when I mention that is potential Heights location into the future. We have that bypass that's coming online soon with the connection from Johnson Lane, and then we have the Belt Loop now, which is obviously directing a lot of traffic down Wicks, so we anticipate a lot more development in that area. So we want to make sure that we have a convenient and centralized location to utilize as a transfer center in anticipation of that growth happening. As far as the quick connection goes, the Heights route number 16 continues to be our heaviest utilized route. Actually, this last Friday was the highest ridership we've ever seen on that route with 310 passengers total. That's a route that travels from the downtown transfer center up Main, loops past Walmart pretty much in the Heights and comes back down Lake Elmo and 6 into the downtown core. So we're pushing well past or right around 20 passengers per hour on that right now. So there is a significant demand. The nice thing about that setup currently is that it is if you're in the Heights, it's a 15-minute connection to downtown. But then to continue that trip, you have to take a 30-minute connection to the west end. So we really want to figure out how to fill in that gap and get a quick connection to the west end as well. We will continue to evaluate and upgrade the bus stops as needed to comply with our ADA requirements, as well as a bus stop master plan that we're actually in the final stages of completing. You should hopefully see that in the next few months as far as approval goes. And that's really going to help us prioritize the locations that really need an ADA requirement update. So locations that are crossing, say, a boulevard right now that may not have a pad or something that somebody with a mobility device could cross, but then also utilizing that ridership data and the stop analysis data that we have to really determine what is the demand at that location. Do we need better amenities? Do we need a shelter, bench, improved lighting, things such as that? And then the final part is we do have quite a bit of planning changes to put into place as far as our routing goes in the downtown area, just in anticipation of that one-way to two-way conversion that will be taking place. So that'll also be a little bit of a lift for us. So that kind of wraps up our priorities. I'm happy to answer any questions or if Laura's got any.
Very good. Thank you very much. Questions? Well, Rusty, while you're there, how's the Google integration? You've heard a lot about software integrations go wrong. Give us some good news, please.
Well, the Google integration is working as it is intended. We were able to actually add our real-time information into it as well. So when you plan that trip on your smartphone, not only does it tell you where and when to catch the bus, it also tells you if the bus is running early or late, so you can anticipate a little bit better what time that bus will be there. So, and really just to speak to what Public Works is going through, I mean, we went through our AVL implementation, and these things are never smooth. We ran into hiccups as well. Vendors generally like to overpromise and underdeliver is what my experience has been in those regards. But we're just happy that it's up and running and being utilized the way that we'd intended. So,
great. Hope that continues. Other questions for Laura Rusty? Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Braun?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had a question about evaluation and upgrading the bus stops and complying with the ADA requirements. As you know, around Billings, we have all of these highly traveled streets where there are no crosswalks, no stop signs, no way to get across Broadwater Central. I could go on, Pauley, Rimrock, all of these different streets. So as a part of your bus stop analysis and various things, are you looking into, do you really plan for those outgoing bus riders to have a stop here and the ingoing on the other way? Or do you anticipate that we could actually have some crosswalks on some of our really, I would say like on Broadwater, there isn't a stop, a pedestrian crossing from 14th down to I think about 7th. So how do you anticipate that? Thank you.
So we do work directly with planning and engineering on those identified locations. It's definitely something we consider when we're placing a bus stop. Generally with this system rollout that we did, we tried to space out our bus stops about a quarter-mile apart, just to minimize walking distances between those bus stops. But we also took into consideration, is there adequate passenger infrastructure or pedestrian infrastructure, to be able to utilize that. And the unfortunate truth is, there's a lot of locations throughout the city that have some significant gaps in the safe pedestrian crossings, but it is conversations that we regularly have. Unfortunately, there's some areas where it would really call for like a mid-block stop or something such as that. But really it takes more of a coordinated effort than between us and engineering to really understand not just what our passenger counts are at that location, but what are the traffic counts at that location, what are the ramifications and so forth too. So it's something we consider. I wish it was something we could move faster on, but government moves at the pace that it moves at. And it's something that we will continue to evaluate within the plan.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. So Laura, I see you've incorporated in here our work on the inner belt loop, which I think is great. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm glad to see it in the planning study. But you also sort of nod at a couple spots in this that we have the bypass coming in as well. What do you think is the right timing to begin the kind of economic planning and economic development, sustainable development planning along the bypass? Is that a 26 work plan? When do you think that's appropriate to begin thinking about? Because you note it in here, but we don't actually have planned work for the bypass itself yet.
Thank you, Councilmember Owen, Council Mayor. I would probably need to work with Wyeth and Anna and talk a little bit about that. We did do the transportation planning corridor study for the bypass a couple years ago, and it did have some very high level, small amounts of economic, but I think that also could be tied into the economic analysis. Again, we don't have the funding to do a real in-depth economic analysis for the Heights neighborhood plan, but our main focus for that plan has been kind of the Main Street corridor, but I think the bypass is going to feed into that whatever happens. Okay. So I think we can do some of that higher level, at least with the neighborhood plan, to get some of that economic information. And then I think we can take those recommendations from that and see what we maybe need, what we're missing.
What the gaps are. Okay. So I just want to be clear, because the last I had visited with Dowell, they weren't sure. The bypass is included in the scope of the Heights neighborhood plan?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Councilmember Kennedy?
Laura, just a question. We've been studying the 21st Street underpass forever. And the 21st Street underpass, we looked at it, you can't go down because of the water level, and you can't come above because the trains have already said, or the companies have already said they can't do anything. Why are we spending more time and money on that intersection and look for something else that may be a advantage for the people to get on each side of the railroad tracks, especially the folks on the south side?
Thank you, Councilmember Kennedy, Mayor, Council. This was a project that we've been working with engineering. Engineering in the CIP has funds allocated to make improvements for that underpass. This study is a way to help maybe guide some of what those improvements could be that could assist with moving not only vehicles, but pedestrians and bicyclists through that when there is a train. Yes, we know the railroad is not going to move their tracks, but what else can we do to maybe help alleviate the traffic congestion or encourage people to use that underpass more to alleviate maybe traffic at the railroad crossings? I've been working with engineering. This been kind of on their radar, and we were hoping to get that study done this year, but it looks like it's going to be pushed back. But I think we will get some good information out of that study, especially with our travel demand model to look at, especially with the two-way conversion. That's going to affect the rest of the streets and how that functionality could help at the 21st underpass.
Mayor, just one other question. I have a problem over on Lewis Avenue from between 8th and 7th on speeding. Mm-hmm. And I was over there one day with a resident along the street. Is there any way we can get a device to measure the speeding on that street? I have to say that watching it for an hour, I didn't have a radar gun, but I could tell you people come down that hill and get going. But is there some way we can look at the study there and go forward?
Yes, Councilmember Kennedy, there is Dakota Martonen and Mike Hayes. They do, Mike Hayes is our traffic count technician, and he does traffic counts all summer. But as part of those traffic counts, you can actually calculate the speed people are traveling and come out with those averages, average daily traffic, the speed, and engineering does those types of studies all the time throughout the city. And I'm sure Mac is aware of that and written it down, and we'll get that on their radar because they can look at that intersection and how traffic flows and what the speed is.
Very good. Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Or just a couple of questions about the funding on this. So the planning department has the city fees, Yellowstone County, and then the Yellowstone County mill levy. Is this funding source the total amount that comes in, or is this the amount that comes in from the Yellowstone County that's allocated to the city of Billings?
So the funding sources, besides the fees generated through subdivision and zoning, the mill levy is a tax on the Yellowstone County within the urbanized area that are taxed for planning services. It's been in place since, wow, how long, Mayor? You helped us with the mill. How long has that mill been in place? 78, 82, long time ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so the amount of money, that's the total amount that's collected for the entire area, not just within the city.
Correct.
Okay.
That's in our urbanized
So
area.
that's kind of city-county money that's coming into your department. So then, when we look at the 25 priorities, is this just the city priorities, or are we talking about city-county priorities? So is all the money that is coming in is actually being spent within the city and none of it in the county, or are we not seeing the county side of things?
Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, we do meet with County Public Works as well, and they will contact us when they may have a project. The last project we did in the county was the Safe Routes to School Phase 2, which we just adopted, which looked at the county schools within the urbanized area. The county road system, they don't have a lot of planning, transportation planning needs at this time, but we always approach them saying, it's that time of year. Do you have any projects that the MPO can work with you on? I actually just went to the county commissioners last week at a discussion and talked about a more open dialogue with them as the MPO, that we are here, don't forget us, we are here and we have transportation planning dollars. What can we help you with? We can't do design work, we can only do transportation planning, but is there some elements? So we've done things like the Lockwood safety, we helped with that. So we do a lot of things within the county. It just is not a lot with the PL funded, except for the Safe Routes to School plan most recently. But we do have projects in the county.
Okay, so for instance, Alkali Creek Road that's getting used quite a bit between, well, the Heights and Highway 3. Is there anything within your department that can help with as far as planning of that, the use of that road? Because it's being utilized quite a bit now. And so is that something that you would be involved, or is that more of a design?
Skyway Drive, correct? Is that what
Oh, this is actually not. This is from just Alkali Creek Road from Skyway Drive to Highway 3.
We could do a corridor, we could propose to do a corridor study similar to what we did for the Interbelt Loop, similar to what we did the Billings Bypass, which really will look at a half a mile on either side of that corridor and make recommendations for, it'll look at land use, it'll look at population growth, and it'll say, in 10 years, Alkali Creek Road is going to have to be expanded from a 2-lane road to a 3-lane with a center turn lane. It can make those kinds of recommendations. So yes, that's definitely something that can be put on the radar to add to the list of transportation planning.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. And since Councilmember Neese raised the issue of the county mill, I'll just kind of provide a little background for everybody who's interested. When that statute was created that authorized counties to establish a countywide planning mill, it was capped at 2 mills by statute. And that was probably in the 70s sometimes. And I don't know if that was a decision of the city and the county or only the county, but rather than levying the full 2 mills, the decision was made here to only assess 1.5 mills. And so other cities and counties around the state assess the full 2 mills. And that's why other planning departments around the state tend to have more planners than we do. If we had that extra $0.5 mil at the countywide level, we'd have 3 or 4 additional planners in our department for the last 30, 40 years, but we don't. So in the late 90s, we took a swing at asking the voters, trying to explain this to the voters, to increase their taxes for planning. And gee, what a surprise, that did not pass. So anyway, that's just a little bit of the history on that one. Any other questions for Laura or Rusty? Okay, don't see any, so thank you very much. We'll open for public comment on item number 3, that's really now item number 2, the draft 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. Is there any public comment on that item? If so, please come forward. No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on that item. Thank you, Laura, Rusty, for your work on that and your departments. We'll then move on to the main attraction for the night, I guess, which is subdivision regulation updates. I had a conversation with Anna on this earlier today. She has a presentation, and what I would suggest, council, is for a kind of a format here, we'll let Anna make her presentation. There's a lot of different topics, so if we start asking her questions, we may never get to the end of that presentation. So make notes of your questions so they don't get lost. She'll go through her full presentation. I'll turn it back to you for sort of factual questions relating to the presentation. And I'll then open it up for public comment so that the public has a chance to weigh in before a real discussion. We also have with us our experts from Public Works, the Police Department, the Fire Department, all of which are related to this. So if you have questions that you have for those experts, we'll also give them an opportunity to weigh in as well and explain a little bit more about Anna's presentation. So with that, I'll ask Chris if he's got anything, and then we need to go through the specific items in that summary. You've seen the 1 through 8 and get clarification for staff. Wyeth, I don't know if he's still with us, specifically asked that we provide clear direction. My suggestion is that we, if silence equals preliminary, at least approval. So if you want to staff to go in a different direction, we need to know it now. We can have a vote if you want on some of the major ones. We may want to do exactly that, but it would be very time consuming to try to have a vote on every single item. I think the default becomes full steam ahead unless there's clear direction from council to the contrary. So with that, I will turn it over to Anna. Anything else, Chris, on that process? Okay. Anna.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me back here for our numerous times that we've been going over the subdivision regulations. So I just wanted to remind everyone, we've introduced these to the public, had a fair amount of public participation, kept them on our website as well, been before you guys on the work sessions, and then we're here again tonight on the work session to discuss some very specific items. Mac had sent an email last week. This is the staff memo. It's attached to your staff report. These are the ones we wanted to focus on. I'm happy to hear any additional questions that you have or things that you see that you would like to address. I'm not trying to skirt around that. We just felt these were very important issues that needed some direction and just clarification. As the mayor mentioned, we've got Public Works here, Fire here, and the Police Department here. They can all speak to their relative topics as well. And so my initial approach at this is going to just be a recap of what's in this memo and giving you a high look at it, and then we can kind of circle back as needed. So on the memo, we've got the first 2 issues, which would be 1 and 2. The first one outlines removing the reference of PTOE from page 42. And this is just saying that it would be required for every single traffic impact study that we do. And we are removing that reference. And this will kind of tie into issue 3 in your memo. Issue 2 is the addition of block lengths exceeding 500 feet requiring traffic calming. We've suggested this because there are many block lengths that follow the zoning code, and the zoning code is written, or we're moving them into subdivision regulations, so let me be very clear, but the requirements can often exceed over 1,000 feet, and that is due to the street frontage requirements within the zoning code itself. So we would like to have traffic calming be part of the design for each of these streets and in any section that exceeds 500 feet. This is going to be a high-level overview of the traffic impact study requirements. Matt can speak more specifically about this. The first thing is that any subdivision that has less than 1,000 trips per day and 100 peak hour trips requires a memo addressing the items that are outlined on page 51 of your subdivision regulations, and it's a bulleted list. The engineering would go over this with the applicant in the pre-application meeting and indicate exactly which one of these items they feel is relevant to that subdivision in depth with them. Subdivisions that trigger 1,000 trips per day and or 100 peak hour trips or more require a traffic impact study, and this traffic impact study would be certified by an engineer with transportation experience, and that would go on the face of the traffic impact study. Then there is the trigger point within the traffic impact study at 500 trips per day or more that requires a certification by a PTOE for the traffic impact study completion.
Councilmember Niche?
Mayor, is the presentation here different than what's in our packet?
Anna, can you
it
address? I
is.
think this is an updated version, right?
It is an updated version, and the reason being is we had a conversation this morning to try to get more information to everyone. That's why we're trying to recap everything. The last piece is the traffic impact study. 5,000 trips per day was added in conversations with Public Works as a way to try to still address concerns that come up within a subdivision, but limit the amount of times you would need to use a PTOE for that certification.
Can we get that presentation emailed to us?
I'm sure we could, right? Yep. Yeah, if you would. And as you go through, if you know that something has changed that's significant today, maybe just try to point it out to help orient people within their packet that they might be looking at.
Sure. Would you guys prefer that the department speak on this? Because I could let Max speak right now to where he could address these slides.
Why don't you get to whatever point that you think's appropriate for transfer over, but rather than going back and forth between you, why don't you wrap up your portion, and then we'll ask for
Perfect.
Public Works to weigh in.
Perfect. So this slide is different. And we're going to skip the very specific information slides just to stay at the high level approach that we had talked about. This is the trips per day bulleted list that was on that page. This is the traffic impact study checklist that Public Works would have within their documents, and this would be a requirement for any traffic impact study. Let's see, so the next issue was the street widths. Staff has proposed to leave this information the same as what's within the subdivision regulations currently. A variance process could be used to reduce street widths requirements, but our main concern was trying to maintain the fire code clear width requirements for the travel lanes. Enforcement, if you were to reduce the street width requirements, was another concern that we had heard. This is just a view of what a street width typical section would be as our subdivision current regulations outline. So a quick information, this slide is also different about variance processes. They are allowable within any piece of the subdivision regulation with city council approval. This is an application that would come forth with the subdivision application. It has a fee of $6.99. Then the applicant must address 5 different things. Granting the variance won't be a detriment to public health, safety, or general welfare, physical surroundings, shape, or topographical conditions of the specific property involved cause an undue hardship. It will not increase taxpayer burden, will not place the subdivision in nonconformance with adopted zoning and growth policy, and the alternative design is equally effective and the objectives of the improvements are satisfied. So this is what we are hoping people will implement if they were going to reduce the street width requirements. And that's so that we can try to keep the concerns of keeping the fire clear width requirements addressed. This would be a good example of when we would see a road that could be narrowed. Here's Glen Haven Drive, and this is adjacent to the golf course. There's no houses that are next to it, so it doesn't really need parking lanes that would be next to it. Therefore, we think it might be a good applicant for the variance process. This is a second example. This is the entrance to Ironwood. I realize this is hard to see. That's the best image that I could get from Google Earth so that you guys could see that. Let's see.
Okay, so issues 5 and 6 within your spreadsheet would be the max collector speed changing from 25 to 35 and max local access speed being 25 miles per hour. Page 53 of the subdivision regulation, which is issue 6 that's outlined, is allowable ribbon curb. And this would be the laydown curb that people can implement into design. That would be approvable by city engineering as part of the stormwater management design process.
What are they?
Just explain what a ribbon curb is.
Oh, it's the laydown curb that's next to the road. So instead of having and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the portion that's just flat next to the road and exists instead of having an actual curb.
And it goes horizontally instead of making that little curve up.
Yes. And that's part of stormwater management. The reason that that would be part of that is to make sure that stormwater is addressed appropriately. Issue 7 is Boulevard Sidewalk. That was an issue that Councilmember Rupsis had brought up. We've removed our former red lines that were part of that, and now we're saying that multi-use trail could be provided in lieu of sidewalks on both sides of the street with city engineering improving, and as long as that trail accesses all lots and is ADA compliant. Issue 8 is the requirement of streetlights on residential streets. There was the point last session where we did not have clear language about having streetlights being a requirement. That has now been added as a suggestion. The additional requirements would be that it's designed in accordance with RP8. These are full cutoff optics, LED lights, as well as not higher than 30 feet above grade.
Well, there's a pause in the action. I'll let you know that you've been emailed the presentation. If you're looking at it at your screen in front of you, it's in your inbox and you could pull it up. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. An issue that was brought up at the last the last council work session, and this was not part of the spreadsheet, so I just wanted to circle back because I had assured council we would have a conversation about this. The question came up regarding no access strips, and that is within the subregs currently as on page 47, it's number 3 on your subdivision regulations, and it states that a no access strip would be designed on lots that are fronting collectors and arterial roads. The intent of this is to not allow access onto those collectors and arterial and keep it within the local streets. We're suggesting that this wording stay the same, and the reason is the issue that we were hearing was regarding fencing adjacent to the arterial roads or collectors, as well as maintenance of the strip of land that would be right next to it. Both of those are things that are outside of the subdivision regulation as opposed to items that are within subdivision regulation. It would be better to try to address those when we're editing zoning code, and it's something that we're going to try to look at in the future and implementing maintenance requirements or enforcement of that in the interim. Just to give you an example, this is also a new slide. This is what it is. It's more of a figurative no access strip that goes on the face of the plat. It's the darker dashed line that you're seeing right here, and what this does is it ensures that the person that was on lot 4 accesses from the street that's on the west side of it instead of the north side of it. And the reason that that is that a lesion is a collector. That's another example of this in Annafeld as well. The last bit that we had is this has not changed. This was cul-de-sacs, and the requirement of 20% of all roadway miles can be the maximum amount of cul-de-sacs that are allowable within a subdivision. We just heard the request of seeing where cul-de-sacs exist within the city. So there's quite a few of them that were attached to your staff report, but I left some of them on the screen, and that would be Copper Ridge, High Sierra, Ironwood, and those are just uses of lots of cul-de-sacs instead of having the connectivity that we're looking for. That's all that I have for you.
Great. And so let's let the experts add to anything that you have, at least briefly. I think that is mostly Public Works, but also Billings Fire Department on street widths and the Fire Department on width and Police Department on lighting potentially. So Mac, if you want us to take the podium and add as you would like, and we'll hear from the other experts, and then probably hear from public. I'll open it for public comment, and then give it to council for questions, and we can get into the details.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I'm gonna take a little bit of liberty on the first issues 1 and 2, just to be brief and succinct.
And again, make your notes of your questions, because we'll come back to.
Yeah, so number 1 was just kind of clean up. There was that statement in there that, you know, basically everything needs the PTOE, and we don't believe that, and we explained why. Number 2 there, the block lengths, I think that was fairly basic, you know, over, and why 500 feet? Those are generally the limits at which we would say if we need traffic calming, that's about the distance for folks to, you know, speed up and then slow down. So felt like that was an appropriate treatment there. I'm going to move on to the traffic studies. What we did, we took a look back. We had the issue we presented before. We had some studies that we've been seeing that are really rough, like they don't address the issues. We also had some development community input on some smaller studies, and they're saying, hey, why are we doing a small study on this? We're spending, you know, $10,000 to do the study, and then the outcome is that the system is okay, but we're paying some cash, so that there is some delta there. So how do we deal with that? And that's back to, and the other thing we heard from the development community is we want a set process. We don't like surprises, which makes total sense. So there's the traffic study checklist that was asked for. So we kind of formalized that into a 2-tier review to kind of simplify. So what does that mean? I'm going to call it the large fulls traffic study. And we went back and looked at some of our subdivisions for basically the past 10 years. And you're going to say, well, why these numbers? They're not arbitrary. 100 peak hour trips, that's kind of the level that starts to, the morning commute, the evening commute, that's the number that starts to impact operations. That's the why there. And then the 1,000 trips per day, maybe all day long, there's a big volume, so that has impact. And then we said, okay, what's the threshold for the smaller ones? What are we really after? We're after the applicant to tell us what are some of the basic elements that might have an impact. All the way down to a 2-lot minor. What do we care about on that one? Maybe where the approaches are. Simple as that, depending on the use. So just a little background on the PTOE and where we tried to implement that, and that's the certification for the professional traffic operations engineer. We kind of looked at what is that real level where that certification should be kind of necessary. We kind of drew that line at 5,000 trips per day, and the why. A couple examples, I know Costco's a site. We had some discussions on what are the really big ones that we really want this certification for. So for an example, Costco, 12,000 trips per day, Zimmerman Home Place, and these are projects that have been through this system, 18,000, NFL 10,000. So here's our checklist. This is actually the same information that's in the old Appendix A or F in the current subdivision regulations. So we just kind of made it a little bit more visual for folks to follow. Kind of talked about some of the items that on the little studies, they would meet with us first, and we would decide maybe you're looking at some of these elements. So one of the questions was, well, what does it take to get this professional traffic operations certification? Number one, the prerequisite is you have 4 years of traffic experience. You held a valid PE, and really the big one is that you passed the PTOE exam. One of our staff members just passed that, so we now have a PTOE on staff to look at these things, but not a serious high bar. And then, you know, what is traffic operations engineering? There's kind of a list of items there, dealing with traffic studies, operations, some geometry things. One of the, I included in here, just, this is kind of a look back at the subdivision traffic studies, that'll kind of give you an example of how many trips they were, who the author was, the date. I kind of ranked them by most recent, to kind of look at that peak hour trip. So that's where we kind of looked at, some of the, those thresholds which we're recommending. Kind of look at the past data. Do we want to stop there, Mayor? And
Have you covered everything of the
That was-
1 through 8?
that was item number 3. I can, go through the,
Why don't you finish up 5, 6, all of the public works related ones, 5, 6, and 7?
sure. So for the streets, this was kind of multi-department at this point, with the 34-foot width. It's kind of back to that from a public works standpoint, that basic building block of the 20-foot fire code clear width plus, and this is assuming parking on both sides. If there's questions on some of the fire or the emergency services, I'd have to defer there. Go to here. 5 and 6, we just wanted to clarify. I know there were some questions at the last meeting about what is the design speed. So we did list the maximum, and I think that was a question maybe by Councilmember Rupsis if that was a typo, and we did purposely put that as a maximum in the code there, both of those. And then we currently do allow for the ribbon curb as part of a stormwater solution on certain examples. It's not, I'll tell you, it's not necessarily appropriate everywhere, but it is a design tool that works in certain applications. And then just clarifying that language on boulevard sidewalk. I think we talked about that one last time. With the streetlights, I know there was some questions, I think in the packet. I kind of clarified one of those calculations and looked at whether the streetlights are on one side or alternating. It was in the example there of a typical cost, if you will.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Mac. Okay, so council, why don't we go ahead and if you've got questions for Mac, and if they go into the issue of street width, we'll want to ask the fire department to come up and talk with us before that, and also streetlights we'll want to hear from police. So questions for Mac. Councilmember Boyack, Councilmember Ripsis?
You had a slide up that showed Zimmerman Place, about 18,000 trips a day. But it was done in 2017, and the property still is going to add a zillion more people going forward. So was that a swag guess back 7 years ago that they thought there would be 18, or how do you know that, how do you figure that out?
Yeah, great question. So historically, what we've been doing, when you come in and they master planned the subdivision, at the time of subdivision, they went through the study as we normally do. They basically said, I'm rounding a little bit. I rounded the numbers for clarity. We're going to have 18,000 trips per day. They may come in now. You've seen some multifamily development there. They've been doing some updates to that study, and they'll come in and say, are we still kind of following the traffic plan, if you will? So as we go, that was the original study. There's been several updates to that as development proposals come through. So we're still tracking what are the traffic, because things change over time.
Yeah.
Councilor Boyack?
So let's say there's 30,000 now. What's the big deal? What are you going to do with that information?
Well, they would have to mitigate their impact if that, if the number went from, like if 18,000 said, well, you need a signal here, and they come in with the new proposal and it says, well, it's 30,000, that may have other things they need to build or cash to support other turn lanes or whatever. We'll look at each one of those as they come in. So if there's cumulative impacts, we're dealing with those.
Thank you. Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Mac, just one quick logic question. Is it 100 peak hours and 1,000 trips? I think I've seen a couple different slides in the presentations. Sometimes it says or, sometimes it says and. Which is it for that medium tier?
That would be an or.
Should be
If you
an
trigger
or.
either one.
Okay, so, because this says and,
Yeah, we can clarify that.
okay, I wanted to know which we were dealing with there. Thank you. The other thing is, how are you or somebody going to determine whether something has been certified with a P with transportation experience? What level are you looking at there? How are we going to do that objectively that, doesn't put you guys in a bad situation of saying, hey, I don't think this person really has the experience we're looking for, we need somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. All professional engineers, there's an ethics thing there. They have to put their stamp on that. Usually that comes out in the materials that are submitted, but we're also having them self-certify that not only am I experienced in this, I mean, that they're actually, signing that I'm in responsible charge to prepare, it's been prepared by me and I know what I'm doing, if you will.
So just to clarify, Mac, the 4-year experience requirement is a Billings requirement. It is not an association that is a necessary requirement for becoming a professional traffic engineer?
No, that's a prerequisite to the PTOE, yes.
Okay, so why is it even our concern? It's somebody else making that determination. You're either a professional traffic engineer or you are not, however you got there.
That's
but
correct.
It's up to somebody else to decide, right? Is that correct, Mac?
That's correct.
Okay.
Sorry,
Councilor
Mayor,
Rosa?
just a clarification. For this middle tier
Right.
of projects, it's only, the wording is certified PE with transportation experience. And I'm just wondering what significant or sufficient transportation experience means.
Yeah, I mean, where we're getting at there, that it's not a mechanical engineers, shouldn't probably be doing traffic studies. They're signing on the line that I'm experienced in this and I have a Montana professional engineering license.
But a civil engineer who had a traffic class in college qualifies?
Probably at this level, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Joy?
I got a sidewalk question. When do we require sidewalks at the corners to have the ADA coming down accessibility?
Generally, that would be most intersections. Yeah, I'm having a hard time thinking of where we wouldn't on a new subdivision.
So in the subdivision, they should be putting those ADA so wheelchairs can come up and down.
Correct. And we review those as part of the design plans submittal. It's
Okay.
a separate process, but we do look at that.
Is that in our subdivision rules right now? On the ADA compliance?
Need to meet ADA, and I know that pretty much without exception, all corners on new subdivisions get ramps, yes.
Okay, I have just one question off of this for just a minute. Is the 6th Street underpass, why wouldn't they put ADA accessible corners in there when they first poured them? Because right now, they're ripping them out and putting new ones in. It just doesn't make sense to me, and the only reason I'm asking this is I just want to make sure everybody knows before they build that subdivision that they are going to put those ADA ones in, and you don't come back and have to redo something they've done. Because I'm watching the state rip theirs out again and put new ones in and costing us more money.
Yeah, I'm aware of those. I don't think, I mean, that is an MDT project. I don't know the reason why that, maybe that was a construction element that they're fixing now. I don't know the implication there, but I can tell you with all of our new development submittals, we are looking at, we Public Works and Engineering are looking at the ADA ramps.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up at another time with that.
Thank you, Councilmember Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Mac, I feel like I'm just not getting it. So talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. What is the value of having a PTOE complete a traffic study?
So the value is, and we kind of talked about that, at this 5,000 trips per day, which is a major, I highlighted some of the big ones there. The Costco's of the world, that really needs a specialist to look at what are the impacts to operations. that's where we just decided to define that.
But what are we going to get that's different than what we're getting now?
Those folks, they're really involved in, signal timing. What are the impacts to the other signals? Looking at that more at a real.
And a PE can't do that, is what you're telling me.
Generally not at that 5,000 trip and.
How many PTOEs are there in Billings?
In Billings? I think there's maybe 4 or 5.
So aren't we going to really narrow the scope of who can do traffic studies at a certain level?
Well, and I don't think that's, remember, a lot of engineers doing work in Billings, even the PTOEs, they're not necessarily residing in Billings.
No, I get that, but we'd rather have people in Billings getting work, right? So aren't we really lowering the number of people who can bid on projects?
I think that would be speculative. I mean, I'll go back to the data here. These are the folks that have authored studies, sort of recently, if you will. We don't have a lot of them, honestly, that are of scale. And these folks generally have PTOEs. But that, once again, that's not a requirement. I'm going to say 95% of the studies that we're going to get don't hit that 5,000 number. Obviously, the first group there, if you will, there's only two out of this entire list in 10 years that would have hit that PTOE threshold on this list.
Okay, so when do you anticipate that the PEs or the PTOEs, whatever sort of advanced level there are they going to have A, ability, and B, access to information to do more systems level modeling? Because at that level of traffic impact, it's not just the 4 streets that border the acreage of land, right? I mean, these are system impacts.
Correct.
So are we going to be more robust in what we expect out of those studies?
No, the criteria is the same. It's just a higher level of saying, hey, I'm educated. I have this certification for these. There's only 2 on this list that would trigger the 5,000. It's a higher level of comfort. Interestingly enough, we for example, the Costco study. I know that's site, but it's a parallel. That study just came in, authored by a PTOE, just kind of based on inherently the level of analysis.
And did you find it to be better or more interesting or more useful for city planning purposes? Because that's really what we need, right, is city planning purposes.
That's correct. In that particular instance, yes.
Okay.
But once again, that was a high number of trips.
So if we start getting these significantly more sophisticated studies, how will that change the internal modeling that we're doing on the traffic system holistically? When are we making all these things talk to each other?
Internally, we're kind of, these are always on our radar. We kind of know what some of these have recommended or what the impacts are. And we're actually taking those into account as one of the other things we're doing, we look at signal priorities. We have a whole list of, those right now. So these actually feed that process that we work on right now.
So we have some kind of internal model that kind of looks at the whole city, right?
Correct.
And so if we go to this tiered system of modeling, let's go to the lower end now, not the PTOE, but the memo end.
Correct.
Do they get to use that model so that they can say, well, we're in the proximity of Zimmerman Home Place, so we're going to reference our memo based on what we learned in that large traffic study?
Well, yes, let's take the little study. Let's say a house split their lot in half. They want to create one more residence next to Zimmerman Home Place. That's at the level that we probably, this is going to sound terrible, we don't care about the traffic impact because it's so small. What we care about, and there's a process moving forward with, now they do have a cumulative impact, and so that's on the financial side. But with that 2 lot, we're going to say, where is your approach? Let's make sure that's in a safe place. We're covering site distance, and that's that low tier of sort of self-reporting.
But that didn't actually answer my question. My question was, when do people get access to either our city model to be able to understand the whole system? Are these studies public so that the next subsequent system can grab what they did and incorporate it? How do we make this work together?
So at that mid-tier, most of these consultants are highly aware of We provide a lot of times data, like if, author number one did some data collection, and we offer that out to the next one. If they're adjacent, we share information.
Can the public ever see that?
Sure, and we've had requests for that.
So they have to essentially request it. We don't publish traffic studies on our website.
Yeah, it's some of those studies are very, it's more about the recommendations that are useful, but some of that nomenclature gets very engineering-ish and acronyms, but it's available.
Okay, so I know I'm pushing my time here, but I think one of the challenges that I have is when the public comes in and they're frustrated about a new subdivision, we tell them, don't sweat it. We're going to make these guys do a traffic study, and now we're going to make them be much more sophisticated. And we know it's going to be taken care of. But when does the public get to see that it was? When do they get to see the study, know how all of the recommendations network together? How do we put this together into a single story?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I'm going to take the little one because
Yeah.
that doesn't get the full detailed study. So at the beginning, working with planning, that's why we tried to, at the beginning with the pre-application, the applicant is going to get to tell the city, here's these elements that we need to allow for, so that the public on day one sees what the traffic impacts of even a small subdivision are. That's the why we tiered it this way.
Okay. I think I may have more questions, but I'm done now, Mayor.
Okay, Councilmember Troy and Councilmember Neese and Shaw.
Thank you. I have, I have 3 questions, so I will ask the easiest one first. For issue 5 and 6, where we're talking about maximum speeds on collectors, we have 25 to 35. Do we ever make it 30? And I'll tell you the reason why. Okay, so everybody knows you can go 35 plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. And so the next thing you know, you have people going 40 because 35 plus 5 is 40. And so then we have 40 mile an hour people basically driving 40 mile an hour in collectors. Do we ever make it 30? So if we have 25 to 30 plus 5, then they're actually hitting the speed limit, which is 35. We kind of, manipulate it a little bit that way.
So I'm going to answer that. Historically, the city has been in kind of that 10 mile an hour increments, but to your point, that is allowable by law, absolutely. It could be a 30. With the 0.
Now, my next question is, when these traffic impact studies are done, where do you collect the impact on pedestrian safety? So this is where that's where I get concerned, is that it's a lot about vehicular impacts. And I know there's maybe one area, but how do we ensure pedestrian safety when we're having traffic impact surveys?
That's one of the things that we can start to look more at there. And in fact, we don't have pedestrians specifically called out there, but I think we could add that for sure.
Good. This is going very well, Mr. Fogelsong. Now, one more. ADA accessible trails being replaced for sidewalks. Now, I don't imagine this as safe. And I don't even imagine it as practical. And this is my concern. And I know this was feedback you got from council about using this. People put fences up. How is anyone going to know there is a person at their back fence who is using the trail as access to the house? And if the person is on a mobility device, are they going to have to send a text message to say, hey, come to your back because that's where I'm at? Because most people, and we've heard that many of the trails are, fences all along. So how's a person going to know that there's someone at the back gate using the trail to access their home or to visit them or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that. We did try to, based on some council feedback, allow some flexibility in the code that, I know I presented an example at the previous work session. This is a tricky one to implement in practice, but it is a tool that can be utilized.
Just, here's a little feedback. I'm sure you don't need any, but here's some feedback. If you had a trail and everybody is putting up a fence along the trail, which is very, very likely and happens very, very often, is there an access for a person to actually get through the fence to use it like a sidewalk? A sidewalk that's in front of the house, the sidewalk, then there's a little trail up to the front door, a sidewalk up to the front door. If you have a trail and there's an offset of 3 or 4 feet and then a fence, how is a person, I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking that there are a lot of really difficult issues to address if between the trail and the person's backyard, where they may have a 8-foot privacy fence, how is a person with a mobility device going to get from the trail to the fence? So that's just a little feedback. I don't quite see it in my brain, but maybe you do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese and Shaw and Hewlett.
I'm sorry,
You want to go to that specifically?
Yeah, that issue specifically. I think
okay. Others?
Councilmember Joy is talking about a different issue than what's actually being presented here. This isn't actually about having a trail like on the Lippic subdivision where it's in the back, at the backyards. This is about actually allowing a multi-use trail instead of a sidewalk on a street. Is that correct?
Well, it's both.
It is both.
Yeah, it's both.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, let's move on. We can come back to that later if you want. Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Because I'll just keep going on this same topic because that was one of my questions too. Is one of the things I am concerned about is people building the tall fences along, whether it's a sidewalk or trail along the street. It's going to block the view of the street, and so. What I don't see in here is in the subdivision regulations, again, where we're making sure that there's a sight distance of either heights or through the fence, something that where, eyes are still on the street and things like that. So, and if it is a trail and if it's not, again, if we're going to do something like on Wicks Lane where they did a trail along the side of the road that's on the street frontage, I can understand that most people are not going to put fences up in the front, but they do still. And that's the kind of thing we want to prevent because we want to make sure that, again, there's eyes on the street. So I think we need to make sure that's addressed. That's one of the subted principles is to making sure that there's eyes on the streets. And if we're allowing a lot of fences up there, then why don't we just, that's what we're trying to avoid in a lot of cases. And then again, if we're putting trails or cut-through sidewalks, some of those cul-de-sac subdivisions, a lot of them have those cut-through sidewalks. We have to address the fact that those fences cannot be, high fences. They have to be see-through type fences if they're going to be high, something like that. So those are some really concerns that I didn't see addressed in here, but I am concerned about allowing some of these on there. So I just want to, you can address that if you like, and I got some other.
Yeah, and respectfully, I think the fence question is more, as Anna mentioned previously, is a zoning code.
I think it is, but my concern is, when they have these subdivisions regulations, I think it'd be more powerful in the subdivision regulations than in zoning. And so I personally would like to see those things moved into whether it's street frontage or trail systems where if they're putting in those trail systems, they know right up front when they're developing the subdivision, they have to have those fencing regulations ready to go.
From one point of view.
There's also a portion that exists on page 94 of the subregs about new parks and trail corridors on new parks. It says that linear parkland and privacy fencing adjacent to it can not exceed more than 4 feet in height. So that's on page 94 as well.
Okay, as long as that's addressing that, whether it's 4 feet in height, or I don't care if it's 6 feet, as long as it's see-through, or, also the other thing you have to consider is maybe they'll have a 4-foot fence, but it's a 6-foot hedge. And then it's doing the same thing. It's obstructing the view of what can be seen. And I don't see these regulations actually addressing that issue. In that. So, but I'll move on to that because maybe I'm the only one who believes that. when it comes to I agree with Councilmember Joy when you're talking about this transportation. I didn't see a whole lot in there about pedestrian, but also a lot about the traffic being bicycle traffic. And one of the things I'm seeing now is we have our bike lanes that we're putting in. We're talking about street widths, but we're not really allowing the street widths to have enough room for bike lanes. And so we're making the bikes share the street. Now, maybe we want to do that because that's traffic calming and we use our bike people to slow the traffic down. I wouldn't want to be that cyclist, but I think we need to look at redesigning the way we're looking at our streets to where maybe we don't do a 10-foot right away for sidewalk and parkway, but maybe we have a bike lane there and a 5-foot sidewalk next to each other, something like that. But we're not seeing that where we're incorporating any of that type of bicycle traffic. I don't think into at least the designs or what I saw in the presentation. I didn't see any real bike lanes in there.
Yeah, Councilmember Neese, kind of in the right-of-way dedication, and then as we're starting to talk about arterials and potentially collectors now. In the local residential streets, that's not a that's generally assumed that's an on-street facility. But we do already allow for bike lanes in collector and arterial design. And what's going to further inform that with particular streets in Billings is as we go through this transportation master plan, we'll be looking at that. Which are the streets that we want to highlight that? Are there streets that maybe we don't? And how does that work with our complete streets? But currently within the widths and the lanes that we have on those, we do allow for those facilities. And with a lot of the arterials, we're building that separated, protected multi-use trail as a sort of matter of fact.
Okay, and then the last thing I did have questions was brought up by Councilmember Owen is these PTOEs on these traffic studies. And so I'm not seeing the value in this, so explain this to me. Could we only have, I think, 7 or 8 of these in the city, not even, maybe it's 9, I think one of them is the city of Billings, and so I don't think that counts. But and I think most of them work for one firm. And so that's concerning that we don't have a whole lot of these within the city. And it's going to kind of drive all the traffic to this one or two firms that have these. But more importantly, I think is really what are we really going to be getting out of it? Because if you look at if the Costco is an example of a project that was done by PTOE, I heard a lot of complaints about that project, and we had to go back to that and figure out how to get the traffic, re-engineered, and the state had to come in and do some things. And so I'm not so sure even having something like that on it is really helpful, because whether it's done by a PTOE or not, isn't the property owner going to have to come back and mitigate the traffic increase, whatever it is? So I'm not seeing how that has been helpful in the past than the example you gave, and how it's going to be helpful in the future.
Yeah, and I guess back to, I want to use this history here, if we will, as data. So out of all these are all traffic studies. These are all traffic studies that would hit the proposed criteria to do a traffic study. There's only 2 on this entire list that in theory would be over that 5,000 threshold. So I don't know what the number is. 85% of all these studies would have gone through with a civil engineer such as myself, authoring a traffic study, as long as they're hitting all the elements in the checklist.
So what you're saying is we're going to steer the largest projects to just a few firms.
Well,
that's what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm mishearing that.
I don't know that I believe that, because, for example, Costco was an out-of-town firm. I would be speculating on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw, Councilmember Kennedy, and Council, we're at our break time, but I don't want to take a break at this point. Let's finish up. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Shaw, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll get public comment. We'll then move through the individual 8 items and try to check those off. When we get to item 4 about street width, we'll make sure we hear from Fire Marshal Fender if he's got any comments, and also the BPD on our final item of lighting. So that's the plan. Councilmember Shaw, and we'll wrap up Councilmember Kennedy and take a break.
I do have a question about street widths, I think for you, Mac. Can you help me understand, so I get this scenario, no question, but if there's a subdivision that says, we don't actually want parking on both sides of the street, we only want it on one, or we don't want any parking on this street, why not allow them the option without having to go through the variance process to narrow that street down? And can we put that in, I mean, could we put that in here of saying, hey, if you want to take off parking on one side, you can chop down your street by 6.5 feet and still serve the purpose, I think, that of the emergency access?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that from a public works standpoint. I think the answer would be yes. There are trade-offs, and obviously from emergency services and police department, that we would want to get their input on your question on that. Yes.
Okay, whenever. It doesn't have to be.
Why don't
but
we
yeah.
do that? So, Jamie, you want to address that? I guess the question is, are you comfortable with a more narrow street than 34 feet in local neighborhoods if parking is prohibited on one side? Correct, Councilor Shaw?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So the biggest issue that we've always had, as soon as we want to narrow streets less than 34, is the enforcement of it. As soon as we have somebody that's going to park on the side of the road and we can't enforce them to not park there, it becomes an issue for us. So just so everybody kind of understands the logistics of how we respond to different incidences, I think it would kind of clarify a lot of different things. So a lot of people have this idea that we have automatic duties when so let's say we respond to a structure fire and we're going to have 5 apparatuses responding. It doesn't go in order where the first one goes search and rescue, the second one goes for access and water supply, the third one goes for ventilation, whatever it is. We do a method that's called calm the chaos. And what happens is it gives us a dynamic approach to the priorities of that individual incident. So we can have, let's say we have an incident at one address. Our tactics are going to be different if we have an incident at that same address, but it's a different incident. So depending on the order of how the apparatuses are responding there, changes their duties. And that has to do with who's incoming, where the actual incident is at, where the station is, or where the apparatus is coming from. So this is kind of goes back to our last work session where you had a question about having apparatuses being able to park side by side. Well, part of that is if we're doing this calm the chaos, this dynamic approach, we can't determine pre-incident which apparatus is going to hook up to a hydrant. As soon as that apparatus hooks up to a hydrant, we call it a large diameter hose, an LGH hose, that hooks up off of the back, we hook it up to a hydrant. That basically nullifies that entire section of street because we pull it down. Well, we still have to perform fire ground operations. We still have to have the ambulance be able to get in there. PD still has to be on scene in some instances. And we've had multiple times where we're on structure fire. We have this whole side of the lane shut down, and then we have another structure fire response. So we're completely bottlenecked in as soon as we start narrowing the streets any further than the requirements for whatever, regardless of the reason. So if the intent is to have somebody, no parking is there, and then we're going to enforce it, it's not a problem until it's a problem. As soon as we have somebody park there, we completely limit down the capabilities of the fire department. So I hope that gives like a little backstory, a little clarification on how we respond. And as soon as we start narrowing the street widths down, it completely congests our operations and how we perform our duties. So we require just the minimum, and I actually have like a little video that I did. We took a drone and I flew a drone out at Annafeld, and I can actually pull it up here. Give me a quick second. Yeah, I think it was it was like, I just added it in the presentation. No, it's actually like in a whole separate document presentation. It's not in the slideshow. Sorry. So I'll fast
fast forward, because we were having a little bit of technical difficulties. So it's playing, it's just black until we hit a couple, 2 minutes in. There. Oh, jeez. Sorry, technical difficulties.
While they're trying to do that, I don't know if you can describe what's on the video and,
Yeah, basically what we did is I just took engine 4 and we took truck 5, and truck 5 is actually the fire station number 5 across from the old Golden Corral. It's over there. And we had them go drive Annafeld, and we took a drone and we flew a drone over just to kind of give an aerial footage of what it looks like when we're responding through Annafeld subdivision. And the thing to note with Station 5 is truck 5 is actually our responding apparatus to every incident that we're going to have out of there. So a lot of people have this idea that we're only responding truck 5 or truck 1 to structure fires. That's not the case. On a routine basis, we will respond truck 5, truck 1, which are bigger apparatuses, require more room to every type of incident. That's our main responding apparatus out of Station 5. Yeah, and sorry, there was some drone footage problems, and we didn't know it till we got finished with everything, but there's basically where it kicks in. So the point being is we did this drone footage. This was last week, and we did it at 10 o'clock in the morning. So there's absolutely nobody really down there. We never ran across any traffic that's actually running into us. So I wish that was actually a better example to show how difficult it is to maneuver through Annafeld when we have a big apparatus like this. But we make a right-hand turn right here. And if we actually have parking on both sides, we wouldn't be able to make this turn. And so you can see it right here. It's kind of where we have some of the other. There it is right there. And this is just us pulling up and probably the least amount of traffic that's ever going to be available down at Annafeld. And so the whole idea, the design behind that is for people to pass incoming traffic both ways. We can't do that with the apparatus we have now. And the kicker is that street is 34 width. That's what we're requiring right now. And so we actually pull this up and we have our outriggers that kick out. They kick out 6 feet on both sides, and it completely shuts down the entire street as soon as we do that. That's outside of if we have to hook up to a hydrant, pull an LDH hose, it's going to further shut down, and all it does is just bottlenecks everything. It complicates stuff for us, complicates stuff for BPD, for AMR. Any type of emergency services completely get shut down as soon as we start condensing any type of streets. And then I have a picture, and basically what we did is we stopped it. We hang a left, and then we parked the two apparatuses next to each other. Then we just drove up the street, and then we showed the outriggers so you can see what it looks like when you actually have the outriggers that kick out. But it's extremely, extremely congested. And I don't know if that necessarily does justice on there, but when you're actually in the apparatus, in the engineer's seat, in the captain's seat, it's extremely congested.
Okay, Fire Marshal, I just want to respect Councilmember Shaw's question, which is, again, your position. If if parking were prohibited on one side of the street, could you have a street that's narrower than 34 feet? I'm putting words in your mouth, but what I interpret you to say is that, yes, that's okay, because you wouldn't have the 7 feet for that parking requirement. But the problem is enforcement, and as soon as somebody is where they shouldn't be, you've got a big problem, and that's your concern. In theory, it's okay, but in practice, it's not.
Absolutely. And it's ironic that I come out. So I'm in a fire marshal's meeting with all the other fire marshals in the state, and we go over a bunch of different stuff. And so I was talking to them about this situation that we had going on. And the fire marshal in Helena, Lou Antonik, actually just had this discussion and just passed in Helena, increasing their road width from 26 to 34 for that exact reason, because they have numerous people that park, and no parking, it doesn't matter the number of citations they get, towing, it's a constant problem. So the mentality is to just alleviate that problem from the start. We have 34 street widths, people park wherever they want. We can still perform firefighter operations, and we don't have any issues whatsoever. People park wherever they need to.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shaw, are you okay? Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and Councilor McKinney, and we'll wrap up and take a break. Is this for Mac or for the fire marshal, or who would you like?
I would like who's ever going to address lighting.
Let's take a break on that one, because that's just going to be a big topic, right? And we'll come back, we'll put you up first, we'll ask the Billings, we'll offer a public comment, and then we'll give it to you and ask the police and whoever you'd like at that point, so if we can. Okay, let's take a break, and we'll be back. It's 7:45, let's come back as close to 5 minutes as possible. Anybody out there? So we had a request from our Assistant Chief Lawrence to give us some information on the street width issue from the Billings Police Department. So I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Chief to do that. Also, then we'll turn it over to Nate West from Billings Police Department to talk lighting, and then Councilmember Kennedy will kick us off with some questions on lighting issues. So. Chief.
Oh, Mayor, Council, good evening. I'm just going to piggyback off of what the fire department just did. I agree with all those comments, and I just put together a little slide here for you just to kind of look at. For the police department, our perspective, we would like to keep the roadways as they are, and if you want to make them wider, please do so. It helps us. I mean, there's been some back and forth on narrowing the roadway that may decrease speeding. However, it's never going to stop. You're always going to have people speeding, no matter how wide or narrow the road is. A wider roadway allows for a driver going down the road to react to something as a child running out. Same for law enforcement. If the road's wider when we're responding to calls, especially emergent calls, if a car pulls out, somebody comes out, it gives us time to react. Talked a little bit about parking. There was some discussion of, putting no parking on one side of the road and making everybody park. I can tell you that we get a lot of those types of complaints, and I put up some of the numbers. I will preface that the numbers up there aren't just parking, illegal parking in residential neighborhoods. It's the whole gamut of parking violations. But just to give you a sense of how many calls we go to, again, the last year from July of 23 to July of 24, 571 parking complaints. And that includes our department, our CSOs, and our volunteers are going out and investigating those. And then a year of how many tickets we issued, the CSOs and the volunteers, 479. So as was mentioned earlier, you can put up the signage for no parking, but we're always going to have that problem. And again, I think the video that you saw, I'll take you back to about 2 years ago, the standoff we had on the West End with the barricaded subject that ultimately led to his death. He had taken over a house. We were there, fire was there, AMR was there. And so putting us all on a scene like that together, it gets very congested. And so a narrow roadway is just going to create more problems for us in trying to maneuver, trying to get close to the scene. When we're up front with our armored rescue vehicle, the Bear that you've seen, we may need to bring a fire truck in for fire suppression if something happened. And so, again, a wider roadway is going to allow us to do that. So, as I said, I was here just to piggyback off what fire said. Sergeant West is here to talk about lighting, unless you have any questions for me regarding this.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. Well, with that handover, why don't we go to Nate West and tell us a little bit about lighting, and then we'll go to Councilmember Kennedy.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Sergeant Nate West, Billings Police Department. We met about a year ago and I gave you the basic presentation on SEPTED. My understanding is that you just wanted some information on lighting. I spent 17 years with the police department. A large majority of that was spent on night shift. So I can attest to not only responding to calls for service during nighttime hours, not responding to service, just being out there, being proactive and where we found these criminals and what they were doing in lit and not well lit areas. So I can answer questions for that, but we'll just talk about some of the basic lighting. So in talking about SEPTED principles, Councilman Neese, you brought it up multiple times, talking about eyes on the street, natural surveillance, right? I don't care how well you were set up for natural surveillance and being able to see the street outside of your big picture window in your living room during daytime hours. But if that area is not well lit, when it gets dark out, you have no surveillance, right? And in my experience, that's where crime thrives in the nighttime hours, is where these criminals know they can't be seen, okay? So good lighting is one of the most effective crime deterrents. That's been proven in studies. When used properly, light discourages criminal activity and enhances surveillance, reducing fear. And so it's discouraging that negative behavior, but when people know that that is less likely to happen, their perception is they feel safer. And there's actually a study that I pulled up that we can talk about. One of lighting's main purposes is to illuminate human activity. And so that's in our public areas. We're lighting these areas that are open to the public. If we have them lit and people know that they can be seen, or they have that feeling they can be seen, they're less likely to come and try your car door that's parked in your driveway or even parked in the street. Just like a kid getting in the candy jar, if he knows mom or even thinks mom might be able to see him, he's not going to do it, right? Some other benefits of it are if you're out walking your dog in the nighttime, maybe a park or your sidewalk, and your visibility is limited due to inadequate lighting, you can't see those potential dangers until it's too close to react, right? So if we have these areas properly lit, it gives you the ability to see potential threats, and then on top of that, maybe alleys for escape, if that makes sense. So here's, if it's done incorrectly, there are some negatives, and this is kind of what's unattractive to lighting, okay? So light pollution, that's improper lighting created by us, okay? And when we talk about light pollution, we talk about light trespass, sky glow, that's excessive light that's going up. It's just wasted and unnecessary. What are we trying to light by sending light upward, right? Clutter, that's too many lights, too bright of lights, okay? That's gonna create glare, and it's going to be really bright, but it's gonna make it ineffective in the way that it blinds you and you can't see, okay? It can almost be just as ineffective as no light whatsoever. These issues were introduced, so I'm also part of the SEPTED committee, and we're kind of going on everything that we propose. We're trying to do dark sky compliant. And basically what that does is that just mitigates all these issues. Light trespasses, light where it's not wanted. I've been paying attention a lot in my neighborhood and driving around to look at different fixtures. My neighborhood is there's a lot of light, but there's a lot of inappropriate light. I'm very happy that there's not one in my front yard. My neighbor across the street has a light pole directly in his front yard. And when I get up to go to work at 4:30 in the morning, his entire front yard is illuminated. The whole front of his house is lit up. He darks out all of his blinds are drawn, right? So you can see that, but it's unwanted light by him, so he's closing all of his blinds, so he's not going to see anything. So if we use proper standards, proper fixtures, and proper lights going forward in new subdivisions, we can mitigate all of this. So here's that survey I was talking about in 2021 here in Billings. We did a national police services survey, and I guess the gist of this was just for the public, for those that participated, basically overall to see their safety, right? And so I went in and pulled some numbers. Dan Brooks helped me out with this, but just pulling some numbers to see when people feel safe, when they don't feel safe, and what some of those contributing factors of why they don't feel safe might be, right? So 8% feel unsafe in their neighborhood during daytime hours, okay? And that just might be because of the perception of the area they live in. They might have never had to call us for service, but they might see police cars in their neighborhood regularly, right? So they feel more unsafe. There's a lot of contributing factors that could go into that. So this stat increases to 25% feeling unsafe in their neighborhood during nighttime hours. That's a pretty substantial increase, right? That's over double, okay, 3 times. So in correlation of that increase, 47% indicated they do not have adequate lighting in their neighborhood at night. So there's a pretty obvious statement that people that don't have lighting or adequate lighting, what they feel is adequate lighting, feel more unsafe than those that do, okay? We're talking about our subdivisions. There's another interesting stat at the bottom. And this is talking about our parks, trails, and pathways, major recreational areas that are open to the public. 71% of people indicated they did not feel safe in major recreational areas in our community. So I guess just going back to the importance of lighting. I don't know what you put in here.
The mayor had asked for comparison of what other cities did.
Okay.
And I just had it as a backup.
Gotcha. And so it's happened, it's too soon in happening. It's too early in the process for us to draw good data right now, but really recently we made a lot of big updates to North Park. As you all know, North Park is very active. It's very active for criminal activity. We just introduced those lights, so maybe given 6 months, we could pull numbers from prior to those lights being put in to 6 months, and I could get those numbers to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sergeant. And the slide up here, it's awfully hard for these old eyes to read, but there's a breakdown: Missoula, Great Falls, Bozeman, and Kalispell. And for somebody a lot younger than me, Councilmember Shaw, can you read that? Everybody else here can read it. Oh, you're looking on the screen. Okay, let's interpret it. Somebody who can. Okay, so Missoula, what does it say? Okay, collectors, but nothing about neighborhood streets. Great Falls says, okay, Bozeman should be considered, Kalispell required on all streets. Okay, thanks for that information. Okay, thank you, Sergeant. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Kennedy with any other questions for staff, and Councilmember Boyette.
When I first came on, Park Hill Drive does not have from 6th all the way to 13th Street streetlights. So we did a survey, thank you, Debbie, and we went out and we asked the folks if they would be willing to come forward. We did do, and this came from Public Works, and I want to address costs, because that's what I keep on hearing from folks that are saying, what's the cost going to be? Because I don't want to see a new development cost us $12,000 more per house to put in lighting. So, and I don't know which of you can address this, but this is the question I have. When I look at the annual assessment estimate on my street, which does not have streetlights, and we wanted to put the streetlights in, I got annual assessment estimate from the city of Billings is for residential, the lowest was $258 per year for 15 years. Then when you look at the annual assessment estimate of the utility-owned district, the residential lowest range is $61 to $78 per year. And if you really looked at it, and if people looked at it on my neighborhood, they would have said, it's going to cost me $7 a year, or $7 a month, or less than the $78 a year. And so the question I have is, I keep on hearing from everyone saying it's going to cost in a new subdivision $12,000 more to build that house to put the lighting in. And all I'm asking for is, can someone explain that to me? Because I was looking at these annual assessments for my neighborhood, and we don't have any lights there. So they would, Montana, or Northwest Energy, or the city would have to contract with Northwest Energy to put those lights up. So they're not there. It would only cost us, if we had the utility-owned district, $7 a month. So I'm not sure where the numbers are coming from, because I would have a real tough time adding another $12,000 to building the home when, if we need to, then say that after the homes are built, then you sign off and we will put a lighting district in and you'll pay the $7 a month. I want to understand this, because I just don't want someone adding on to the price of a home of an additional $12,000 when I can't see it when I looked at the survey I had in my neighborhood.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt, can you address the cost? The staff report number on number 8 was $3,750 per lot plus electricity.
Yeah, Councilmember Kennedy and Mayor and Council, I know in the past through several work sessions, we've tried to look at different, to answer that question. The $12,000, I can assure you, is not coming from the city of Billings and Public Works. That's speculated by others. I don't know the basis of that. What I've tried to give you are facts from costs on real projects. This one right here that I included in the memo, that was from Hollowell Lane. I used a cost of $100 a foot to do this. Our actual cost, now this is 18 months ago, was less than that, but I wanted to be conservative. So these are facts. The numbers that we've given you previous work sessions, those are facts. Those came from Northwestern Energy. I don't know where the 12,000 numbers coming from, but it's not coming from Public Works.
So, but just bottom line, your best conclusion is that 37, assuming that size of lot, 3750 construction cost.
Correct.
But now, that was construction. So you've got to add electricity on top of that, correct?
That's correct.
And then you translated it to the mortgage, assuming 7%, or $25 a month times 12, of course, is about $300 a year.
Yes.
Plus electricity cost. Do we
Which
know
is
what the
pretty close to the number that you saw for Park Hill Drive?
The
It's within
$258 or whatever.
$30 of that, yes.
Okay.
So when I look at that for the city of Billings owned district, the 258 per year for 15 years is actually the dollars you're looking at for the 3,750 plus electricity.
That's correct.
So the question I have is, why would you go with a city-owned utility and not with the utility-owned district that would only cost you the $78 per year? And could you do that with a new subdivision?
So the answer why, and it depends on the person on why. So under the sort of developer installed or the city light district, that's I'm going to use your example, the $270 a year for 15 years. At 15 years, that then drops to just the electric bill, which is, a smaller number.
And that number is $88.
Yes.
After 15 years.
The Northwestern Energy District is that cost per month in perpetuity. That's the difference.
Okay, so they just stretch it out for the next 100 years.
Correct.
Okay, and so just to follow up then, if we ask for the subdivisions to have the lights put in, and if we wanted to do it with a utility-owned district that would just put every household paying in perpetuity, can we figure out a way to do that and have that so people can do the lowest cost?
Yes, we could do that. I think the developer, and I'm speculating for the developers, I think they would want to weigh in on that because it's not all scenarios where the utility district total cost is less.
Okay, is that something we can kind of explore?
Yeah, but as the code is written, I mean, those are both, both of those are still options, so they could choose for sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have those options there. Sergeant West, you are totally right. We need the light, and it does deter criminal activity, and I do believe that. I just was trying to get down to the cost and the cost that I've heard and trying to get it to make some sense out of the district I wanted to put in on Park Hill Drive. I haven't given up yet, but the one I want to put in Park Hill Drive. So I'm hoping I'm comparing apples to apples and trying to figure out the number. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Sergeant, I was just out at about 57th and Grand. There's a subdivision I think it's called Daybreak. No street lights whatsoever, but every house has a yard light. and they all turn on at night, and they turn off in the daytime. And the people love it because they don't have these big glaring lights out there. Plus, they only pay a 100-watt bulb for everyone. What is your analysis of every subdivision having yard light versus a great big light? Just your thoughts.
You know, and if every residence has that, I would imagine there's like an HOA or some kind of alliance where they're required to have that. I guess my input on that is whether it's put in by the city or whether it's required by your HOA and it's there, lighting is lighting. That one of the difficult things, I met with our crime analyst, tried to put some numbers together for you guys and looking at subdivisions and like neighborhoods around our city that are well lit versus aren't well lit. Well, the only thing that she could find mapping tracking wise is streetlights. So we might have a neighborhood that shows no lights on her mapping, but might be something like that where it's actually very well lit due to homeowners and their crime was super low.
Okay, some other questions, and we'll try to let public offer comment on this. Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Neese?
Sergeant, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Max, so either one. Why 150 feet? Is that a SEPTED standard? Is it an engineering preference? Could we space it out a little more broadly and still have appropriate coverage? Why that number?
You look like you were getting that.
Sure. Councilmember Owen, so through design, when folks design a light system, that's kind of a typical spacing, but I made those sort of match the lot lines. But that's a typical spacing that they would design. It's not a hard number. You know, with different light fixtures, maybe that's increased to 200, or maybe the lots fit a 120. It's a variable in the equation. I needed to show an example to come to the cost, but that's a pretty typical spacing.
So the proposed regulation wouldn't say every 150 feet. It would be
No.
sort of designed by neighborhood
right.
by neighborhood. So the costs could vary.
That's right.
Okay.
So, yes.
No, please continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, yes is the answer to your
Okay.
question. Yes.
So how do we think about a light fixture that would be sort of installed near a sidewalk or somehow versus, sort of house lights, garage lights, your front porch light? How do they intersect and work together to create sort of a canopy on the ground? Because I really like the idea of like night sky compliant. I think all that makes sense. Not the big old bulbs, but something that's very focused. How do we use house lights and what we're proposing here to create kind of a canopy on the ground? How do they intersect?
Yeah, I might defer.
And so, like home lights, that's you going, like, I don't know how much experience you have with lighting, but that's just a homeowner going home and like throwing up lights for what they think is effective, right? We talk about lighting the public area, so the sidewalk.
The street.
And the street. Okay, different fixtures we can use. The Cobra heads are good for directing light straight down in a cone. Though some of the older neighborhoods, I drove down Lewis kind of in that 200-300 block, and they're really good looking. They look great, but it's like a decorative lamp and it looks like a lemon drop.
Yeah.
So it's just light going everywhere. It looks great, but at night, that's when you're going to get your glare, your light pollution. So we can use cutoffs, we can use shields, whatever we need to get the light in the areas that are desired to be well lit.
I guess what I was trying to ask is if you're doing a SEPTED analysis of a neighborhood, do you factor in the house lighting as part of the strategy? Or is it just what would be installed under these regs to say this is kind of a SEPTED compliant neighborhood?
If we were going out to do it for the city, it would just be the streetlights.
Okay, thank you.
If we had a residential area that was all willing for us to make contact with them and go out during night and see what they had going on light-wise, that's a lot of moving parts.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Neese, and then we'll open up for public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. This may be for Mac, it could be for you, but the whole idea of lighting, I'm not opposed to the idea of SEPTED lighting. I think that it's appropriate, it does reduce crime. My concern is we're forcing the developers to put in lighting poles and different stuff like that. But I think my thought here is, what is the goal? The goal is to light the public area, like you said, to make sure it's lit to a certain level of light. And so why not have the regulation require that instead? Whether it's individual poles, like the subdivision puts in individual lights in each different lot, and then the property owner owns it and is required to have that on. and that lights appropriately the area that needs to address the public area. Why not have the regulations just address the fact that, you know, a 30% lit street has to be done, whatever, from sidewalk to sidewalk or something like that, right? Can that not be done instead of requiring to put in the streetlights in the subdivisions? Mac or anyone?
So you're asking for just a percentage?
No, again, I'm not a substed expert on lighting. You are. And so you would go into a neighborhood and say, well, listen, this street here is too dark. It's, there's too many areas that are either too bright or too dark. And there needs to be a certain consistency of light throughout the public areas.
Correct.
And so why not just require the subdivision to say, you need to have a certain consistency of light throughout your development area from end of sidewalk to end of sidewalk, if that's what we're talking about, the public areas.
Okay.
And then just leave the developer decide, I'm going to put in streetlights to take care of that, or I'm going to put in some other, but as long as the subted principle of lighting is met within that residential area. Why do we dictate streetlights?
And streetlights, we're talking about the streets?
Because what happens is eventually, we're going to have different technology in 10 or 15 years, and we're not going to, we'll put in, but go ahead.
Mayor, Councilor Neese, generally speaking, what I would say is look at two components. Across our city today, trying to retrofit subdivisions that weren't built with the design of lights, that's one challenge. Not impossible to overcome, but a challenge. Secondly, we are not in the chain of enforcing covenants. So what might happen at the time of construction of the subdivision maybe perfectly meet our intent and our letter of our rule. How you're going to enforce that or deal with that, and it's not going to be 2 years from now, it's going to be 22 years from now or 40 years from now when there's an issue. How you're going to enforce that is going to be a very significant challenge. So, and our focus really is the right-of-way, not that we wouldn't like the front yard lit up or the backyard if there's issues, but that's their private property. That's up to them. We're trying to take care of the public right-of-way, where we're encouraging people to walk, drive, bike, transport, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I missed Councilor Rufus, and then we'll go to public comment. Councilor Rufus? Okay, very good. All right, thank you, Sergeant, appreciate it. Go ahead and take a seat, but don't go away, because we may need more of you. Let's open this up for public comment on subdivision regs, any topic relevant to that, and then we'll kick it back to council. And council, just a reminder, we've got the 8 items. We need to give staff direction, so I'm going to just take it through those 8 items kind of one after another and knock those off. Mr. Brooks.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Dan Brooks with the Billings Chamber at 815 South 27th Street. You all know where we're at on this issue of lighting, supporting new subdivision regulations that would require it. We've talked about a number of things. I want to highlight a couple of what I think are important nuggets of information here. So first, we've discussed often our sort of anecdotal, what we see when we go out and we do our crime prevention through environmental design security surveys. More often than not, there's a need for additional lighting, and when a property owner actually makes that addition of lighting, they see some pretty significant results, not only in the perception and the feel of the space, but we oftentimes hear back from them, yes, that's cleared up the uses that we don't want in that area, drinking in the bushes or fighting, in some cases fornicating. So lighting can have a significant impact, and we see that anecdotally. But I also get asked, well, what does the actual data say? What does the studies and the research show? So I wanted to grab a very recent study, and this is obviously just a screenshot of that front. I just want to get some of that information to you. I'll send you the full study in an email, but I did just want to highlight a couple of the conclusion, results, remarks. But let me first talk a little bit about the study itself. So these researchers wanted to look at the impact of lighting on neighborhoods that had an issue with crime. So they partnered with the New York City Housing Authority, set up 40 randomized sites of additional lighting in these housing development areas to measure the impact of lighting on those areas. What they found was over a 6-month period, it reduced crime by 35%, not just crime, but index crimes, so serious crimes, those rape, homicide, burglary, motor vehicle theft, reduced those by 35% in those areas that had the additional lighting. And as they highlight here in the results, and I've highlighted them literally, more lighting experienced sizable reductions in nighttime outdoor index crimes. And to the point that you were making earlier, Councilman Neese, about the eyes on the streets and that deterrence effect, they actually also add, we also observe a large decline in arrests, indicating that deterrence is the most likely mechanism through which the intervention reduced crime. So people are able to see in their neighborhoods, and would-be criminals feel seen, and so they move on elsewhere to commit crimes. Conclusion is, results suggest that street lighting, when deployed tactically, may be a means through which policymakers can control crime without widening the net of the criminal justice system. So wanted to highlight that for you as kind of a good data point. Like I said, I'll send you the full research paper that's got a really good literature review if you're interested in some of the other papers and research that's out there on lighting. On the other side, I kind of highlighted some of the information that Officer West talked about already, that survey results from the Citizens Police Survey indicating that, and I'm using not the 500 responses in the weighted measure, I'm using the 995 unweighted responses to that survey, showing that almost a majority of people indicate that they don't have adequate lighting in their neighborhoods. So it should come as no surprise then that a quarter of our population, and just kind of utilizing some back of the napkin math of residents over 18, that's about 23,000 people. 23,000 people that don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods at night. And frankly, that's too many. So I think this can help to ensure that new residents moving into to Billings won't feel those same negative, unsafe feelings within their own neighborhood by moving forward with this subdivision regulation requirement. Last thing I want to hit on, I know I'm over time, but we were talking about measuring sort of SEPTED standards for lighting, and it's not necessarily in a height of pole or width of placement of light poles. It's in a measurement of the light that makes it to the ground. So when we look at, we often use the Illumination Engineering Society's standards. More often than not, we're looking at kind of a suburban uncovered parking lot standard, which is 1 foot candle. So the amount of light that falls on a one foot by 1 foot square if you were to hold a candle 1 foot away. So doesn't seem like a lot, but if it's done right, and as Officer West was talking earlier about having good lighting versus bad, when it's done well, that 1 foot candle actually makes a huge difference in neighborhoods. It would allow, you know, if I'm walking up to you on the sidewalk, I can identify that's Councilman Neese, right? And that's really what we're looking for. Could you identify somebody as they walk up to you at night? So anyway, thank you for your time. Like I said, I will send you that research paper in full.
Very good. Thank you. Next.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. So Lori and I, we pay $8 a month to Northwest Energy because we had a pole in the back and they said, hey, for $8, we'll put a light on it. Okay. That was $8. We had a little light pollution when we started, but they were really great. They came out, put a shield on it. The neighbor's property went dark, and that was the end of that problem. And, you know, we haven't had to pick any up beer cans, all kinds of different objects on the side of our yard for quite a while now. You know, that light really did a nice job. We talk about traffic calming. You know, I've been coming down here for a couple of years. The downtown partnership, they worried about traffic calming. We've had traffic calming talks for years and years and years and years in here. There's not one person in town thinks traffic has calmed down. And this isn't picking on them, but we just don't have any enforcement in town. I mean, this is really pathetic. You pick the street, and we ought to just have charity. I mean, is it going to take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or a minute before some dirtbag comes by breaking the law? And we'll just throw a dart right on the map, and I'll bet when we land there, I'll bet we're going to find some pretty damn quick. 4 traffic officers and a sergeant, and we got these kind of problems. Got a cracked windshield. You know why? Because some dirtbag thinks he should run his tires outside of his fenders on his diesel pickup truck and no mud flaps. It's absolutely 100% against the law to operate that motor vehicle. It says so right in the law on the street. Absolutely 100%. And these dirtbags are driving down these towns and through our streets every damn day. And you think one police officer would pick one of them up? Hell no. Hell no. You can't sit in your yard, you can't sit in your house without some piece of trash trying to impress you with how much damn noise you can make, not in front of your house. These are a half a mile away. Hell, you can hear them shifting all the way to right up Laurel Road. Absolutely 100% against the law. Any motor vehicle is not allowed to operate over 95 decibels by the American set of standards specified in the law. Do they think they enforce it? Hell no, they don't enforce it. They don't enforce anything. You took a survey of anybody in town, no one is impressed with the traffic division of this city and the enforcement that's taking place because everyone's complaining about it because everyone knows it's a damn racetrack. You had Councilman Ronning and then Councilman or Commissioner Pittman, they tried an initiative, take it to the track. These dirtbags, they don't want to go to the track. They want to impress you how much damn noise they can make up and down your damn neighborhood. But they get to because there's no damn enforcement. None. None. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Right here. Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Shoemaker. I'm with the Home Builders Association of Billings, Government Affairs Officer. And I just wanted to start out by saying that we do appreciate the idea of bringing lighting. That's definitely not something that the HBA is against by any means, and we also share the concern of safety. I think our main concern was just the costs involved with that it's being placed upon the developers and the future homeowners of those homes after they purchase it, because those costs of putting the light fixtures in is going to be incurred by the buyer eventually. So there does seem to be a lot of concern in terms of that with the builders, which I do appreciate Councilman Kennedy's questioning and clarification on some of that. Basically, there's a special study for housing economics that was done, a national one by the National Association of Home Builders, and it says that into 2023, U.S. estimates indicate that a $1,000 increase in the median price home of $425 in Billings right now. Last month, for July, it was around $400. So basically, increasing the home price by $1,000 would price 140,000 households out of the market, and that is nationally. But in our town, it would be around, if the lighting fixture was $7,000 of increase, it would impact approximately 100 or 1,000 first-time home buyers potentially, because that's our market that we're looking at in those price ranges. So that's just our concern, and we were just, I guess, discussing to see if there would be any solution in terms of if Northwestern Energy could provide assistance with some of the costs involved in installing those fixtures. It sounds like maybe that's a possibility with some of the options as far as it sounds like there's 3 different options or different ways to go about doing it. So I just wanted to put that out there in terms of seeing what's possible so we could, make it more affordable for everybody, especially for the home buyers that are then purchasing those homes. And I know that people want safe homes, and that's why they buy those homes. I personally have a house that has a very large light fixture right in front of it on 8th Street West. So I bought that home knowing that was there. It was one of those things that it's kind of an annoyance because it is very bright. But on one hand, I'm glad it's there. So that basically sums up my comments, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll close the public comment period. Back to council. Council, it's 8:30, so I recommend we move as expeditiously as possible. I'm looking at the summary of the 8 items, which should be toward the, well, in my packet, it comes immediately after the page 150 of the draft regulations. My recommendation is we just go through these, make sure staff has the recommendation or clear direction. The first item up is item number 1, deleting references to the professional traffic engineer. I don't think anybody's going to be arguing to putting those back in. We'll address those in more detail on number 3. So I'm not seeing that there's any need for discussion on item number 1. Is there any disagreement about that? Okay. Item number 2 is the traffic, requiring traffic calming engineering where you've got block lengths exceeding 500 feet, including that in the design. Is there any disagreement, clarification, discussion on that? Or do we move on to number 3? I'm not seeing any disagreement, so we'll keep moving. Again, the default here is staff is going to include these if we don't see anything. Item number 3, this is the professional traffic engineer requirement. Again, staff has now changed that to a 3-tiered arrangement where there's no traffic study under 1,000 trips. That's been increased from the traditional standard of 500 trips. Has been the case for 30 plus years. So that actually requires, but still does require an analysis, but not by a professional engineer. Second, then does require a professional engineer, as it is today, up to 5,000, and it's only after the 5,000 that you hit the requirement of the professional traffic engineer. So that's the current staff recommendation. That's what will be worked into this. Of course, we've had a lot of discussion. The council, you okay with that? Somebody want to make a recommendation of a direct staff to do something different? Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, I don't know that I have a recommendation yet, but just to be clear, what's on this, the spreadsheet that you're looking at seems just a little bit confusing because doesn't it say a PTOE for 100 peak hours and 1,000 trips?
You're right, it did, and that's out of date.
Oh, okay, so what I have is different than what you have.
No, mine is also old. It's just that in the last few days, I'm not sure exactly the timing, staff has made that recommendation to the 5,000. Mac is nodding his head and giving us the thumbs up.
Okay.
So it's 5,000.
I guess I would just renew my concerns that I think we're narrowing the field of bidders. I'm concerned that will slow things down because there's only a few companies then who can do these kinds of projects. I'm not sure that we're actually getting anything out of having a PTOE, at least I haven't heard it tonight. And I'm still frustrated that if we're going to require more sophisticated analysis, we're not making it work together. And I don't hear that we're doing really what we need to do. So I don't know that I have a recommendation. I just want to express my concerns at this point because you said that silent was consent. Sure. And I will not be silent.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Gila, Councilmember Neese?
I just want to let you know also, I have concern. I don't agree with it either.
Okay. Councilmember Gillick?
It seemed like a reasonable accommodation to me. I think now that there's a requirement or might be a requirement, I mean, I think there'll be a lot of engineers who are saying, all right, well, a lot of firms will say, well, we should get that training because we want to be able to do these kinds of projects. I think that's just a natural outcome from this. And it doesn't seem like it's an unreasonable step.
Okay. Councilmember Kennedy?
Just looking at the definition for the PTOE, having 4 years of experience on traffic operations and engineering, holding a valid license, practice of civil, mechanical, electrical, general. And as you go through, 3 and 4 of the 2 pieces, take and attain a passing score on a professional operations engineer exam and paid the application and examination fee and the 3-year certification fee. Almost every PE with the 4-year experience in town could do that. So I think we're just adding another fee and another layer there. So I have a concern on that one.
Okay. Anybody else? Because I, for council or for staff's benefit, I'm still hearing a majority in favor of the proposal. Okay. Item number 4. This is the 34-foot street width. This is not a change. This is just the absence of change. It's keeping it where it is, the status quo. That's the topic. Councilmember Ripsis, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, honestly, I would have kind of hoped that the fire department, with the concerns about the challenges of the current situation in very high density areas like Annafeld, had come forward and said, you know what, we think maybe that needs to be a little more, but in other cases, maybe it doesn't need to be so much. We don't have to have a hard and fast 34-foot minimum for every situation around town. Personally, I don't want to see developers have to go through the variance process and pay a $700 fee to do something like on Glenhaven, where there's really no expectation that there would be parking there. I don't want to have to do that. I would like to see developers come with the street plan as part of the plat process and say, look, there's no need for parking in this areas. In these areas, we think it makes sense for one side parking, and this side it makes sense for 2. Or we're having a very high residential, high density neighborhood, and so we expect that we might need a little more street room there. So I still would like to see flexibility in that range, as we saw in the bit of research that I did, the spreadsheet that I put together. I think something like 2/3 of cities actually provided a range. And even in the staff's presentation, thank you for including this, Hartford, Connecticut had examples of what one-sided parking looks like versus a 2-sided parking. So I'd like to see us get to more of that. And put a little more, I know I don't want to say thought, because I know you guys have thought about this a lot, but a little more flexibility in there to deal with things both on, like a Glenhaven situation or a lower density single family neighborhood where we might not need, full 34-foot width, but in Annafeld, we might need 36. I'd like to see something a bit more flexible and a better framework there to work with.
Thank you, Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to stay with the people with the boots on the ground that said they need at least 34. They're just trying to get the minimum. This is a minimum. Some of the pictures were enlightening that we do need this at least 34, if not bigger. And I understand both sides of this, but the people on the street say they need it, so that's what I'm going to say.
Very good. Other discussion on this topic, Councilor McKeel, Councilor Shaw.
There was reference to the fire code that was mentioned there. That was sort of the thing that was hanging a hat on. And so I think they're referring to the International Fire Code, which does actually have provision for having less than the 20 feet clear. It actually says section 503.2.2 explicitly gives the fire code official authority for narrower streets to, quote, meet the public safety objectives of the jurisdiction. So other cities are using this because they are seeing issues with people driving very fast, speeding. And right now, I mean, I understand, in terms of for that 1.01% of the time when you have a big event going on, it's nice to have a lot of real estate. But there's the other 99.99% of the time that our city is less safe because it encourages higher driving speeds. And I think in addition, as been mentioned, we have more area that's needed for stormwater collection that we're more stormwater we have to deal with. And there are also more costs to develop those streets. So I understand the fire department's looking out for their own interests, but I think we also need to have people like the city council looking out for the interests for everybody in the city as well. And for that reason, I just don't think I'm convinced by what I've seen. So I would like the city not to move forward with the 34. I'd like to see a 31-foot minimum. Thank you.
Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I just wanted to add my voice to the call for flexibility. So I might be in the minority on council on this, but as you said, we should speak out on the issues that we disagree with. I would like to see more flexibility in this standard for all the reasons that have been discussed.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Joy? No, just Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also think there needs to be more flexibility. I think I've been to several different cities where there is no parking on either side. And so depending on where it needs to be, I think that we need to be able to make sure that we still meet the needs of the fire and police. And so in those cases, I will disagree with Councilman Gulick. I think we need to meet the needs of the residents 100% of the time, but I don't think we need to have 34 streets all the time to do it. So I think we can meet 100% without having to require it. So I think we need to have a lesser minimum, but making sure that the fire code is met. If we have to start painting curbs red or something on the side they don't park on, I guess that's what we have to do, and make sure that we have correct, good ordinances there for allow parking division, go park and tow vehicles if they're violating the fire zones. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going to put myself in the Boyette crew. I think we've heard from some of our critical first responders that this is a concern. And what I don't want us to do, if we're creating flexibility, which I don't inherently disagree with, I don't want us to end up in a world where we are having to get special vehicles to get into communities that have a unique vision. I don't want us to have to get special fire trucks, special garbage trucks. I think that's unnecessary and burdensome and ultimately drives up costs to the taxpayer. So I'm inclined to respect what our first responders are saying about needing to get into neighborhoods and be safe. And I think I don't disagree with concerns about lengthy and costly variance processes. So maybe that needs to be addressed and have some sort of streamlined variance. But I think we should take the concerns of police and fire pretty seriously on this.
Very good. Other comments on this topic? I guess where I'm at is first, do no harm. And so I am very hesitant to leave the existing status quo of 34 feet, which seems to be working and which even has challenges based on the video we saw in Annafeld. But that's not to say I'm not open to further information on this. If other communities are doing something that show that range, especially in situations where, as a practical matter, there isn't going to be parking, or we can restrict parking or confine parking to a portion of the block in sort of a parking pod, maybe that would work. I guess where I'm at is leave it at 34 feet, but if we can direct staff to continue its research on this topic, it's not going to go away. It's very important. The issue is being addressed presumably all over the country, and maybe even at the state level, we need to team with some of our other communities through the engineers who talk to all the other engineers and see what we can work out in our other cities. I think this deserves further discussion, but I'm not sure that the case for abandoning 34 feet has been made yet, but maybe it will be in the future. That's where I'm at. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I was kind of surprised and happy. One evening, Councilmember Boyette said that he was in Josephine's Crossing, and there were cars parked on both sides of the street, and he had to stop to wait for one to pass. And I was so happy because actually we had a discussion with the residents of Josephine Crossing, and we told them, park cars on the street, it slows it down, and it worked perfectly. So if you park cars on both sides of the street, it's a small drive space. So I think 34 feet is is a reasonable minimum for us to go with. Thank you.
Okay, I haven't exactly been counting votes, but you could go back and read this, look at the transcript or something like that. We'll move on to item number 5, if there's nothing else on that one. Item number 5 was just the speed limits, which again isn't really change, 25 on locals, 25 or 35 on collectors. Are we okay with that? Mac, was there anything that you actually needed from us on that that's any different? Or no? You're okay? Any discussion on that item? No, not seeing any. Item 6 is allowing ribbon curb where approved by city engineering, and which is not allowed right now. So I haven't heard any disagreement about that. I'm not hearing any disagreement now. So go forth and ribbon curb away. 7, require boulevard walk on the street, but allow trails as a substitute for the sidewalk as long as it's ADA accessible. Councilmember Joy.
Yes, I'm objecting to that. I don't see a workable solution to having a trail going behind people's homes where they're fencing, it's not maintained. I have a lot of, I spoke to someone who used a mobility device, and I asked her specifically about this, and she was like, oh, no way, because even with sidewalks, there are parts of the city where they're at the curb and there's obstructions, and she can't get past. She rides down the street, not because she wants to break the law, not because she wants to take her life in her hands, it's because it's the only way she can travel. So where, if you have this ADA accessible trail, where is she going to have to get on that? And how far is she going to have to travel? And how is she going to know the house number? Because she's going to be in the back of their house, right? Maybe. Well, even if it's at the front, that's the same as the sidewalk. Well, if it's a sidewalk there. But I don't see this as really workable for a person with a mobility device. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bernice.
Mayor, I'm not clear on exactly how this would actually look as far as development. So I have some concerns, like Councilmember Joy does as well. So I sure would like to see this explained a little bit better. Maybe some examples like they did on the road examples, things like that. So we understand what we're actually approving here, because if this is including trails that are not adjacent to the street, then yeah, that is a problem. Now you don't have sidewalks on the streets where people are going to their houses and stuff. So I think we need to, I would object to it as it is right what I'm seeing here.
And Mac, maybe you just offer some clarification here. Isn't the problem that Councilmember Joy describes, which I would not disagree with, the same exists with a sidewalk just as much? I'm thinking of driving up and down Zimmerman Trail. There's the road, there's a sidewalk, and there's a wall of fences with all those issues. What's the difference whether it's a concrete 5-foot sidewalk or a 10-foot asphalt trail?
No difference.
Okay, so, but her issue is maybe one that still we should address otherwise, but.
Absolutely, yeah, I would say as a matter of practice, we don't want obstructions in sidewalks, et cetera, yeah. So to meet ADA, there are some codes that require clear widths, and with new development, obviously we're working on that.
But neither require an access through the fence and to the actual home in either case. Now, we don't have that requirement.
No.
Okay, Councilmember Joy, you want to follow up?
Thank you. Yeah, so in these instances where the trail is functioning as a sidewalk, in the areas that I'm thinking about where you say fencing, and that's on a block system, The person on the mobility device only has to go to the end of the block, turn the corner, and they're on the sidewalk, right? Where there's no access to the back of the house. They're only going a block. How far would you travel in some of these subdivisions that are twisty, twindy, and where do they get in and out? And how do they know where to get in and out in order to find their way around? I don't see this working on a practical level where we have a block system, one block later, there's a corner and you can get around. In a subdivision that uses many different designs, I'm not sure that the person would ever find that place.
Matt, can you address how you define the length of block, including on both sides of a piece of property, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm going to step back one step. So the reason we came up with that language was we've heard a lot of comment even tonight about flexibility. I tend to agree with Councilmember Joy. This is a very difficult standard. So it's the point being, we tried to allow for some flexibility, but all those questions that you're asking when somebody comes in with this alternative are going to have to be answered, which is going to make it challenging to effectively do. But there probably are some very creative solutions that check all the ADA boxes, which they would have to do. That's why we used, ADA access to not just some lots, but all lots. It's a challenging standard to achieve, but we wanted some creative flexibility, if you will.
And when you say ADA access to all lots, you don't mean direct access, do you? Or do you?
No, I do. Let me, for examples, this is going to have to deal with things like the school bus pulling up and all those kinds of things. So we listened, we tried to add the flexibility. I think it's still a challenge there to achieve, but someone's probably creative.
Okay, but does access mean if the trail's adjacent, you have legal access? We're not talking about requiring the construction of a walkway on private property to get from the sidewalk to the barbecue. No, okay. So as long as it's adjacent, technically there's access, technically.
Right.
Okay. Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. And I think Mac made reference to this earlier, or maybe it was Anna. This is actually just keeping the status quo in the subdivision regulations. Subdivision regulations right now say a developer can have alternative transport or pedestrian networks in it and doesn't reference sidewalk requirements. It's not hard for me to imagine a small development where maybe you've got 10 houses, the garages are in the back, and your front yards are actually facing a courtyard style type setup, where then a multi-use trail that comes in and rings the front yards there and connects out to the streets makes much more sense than putting sidewalks on the streets that go around the perimeter of the facility. We haven't seen that kind of development here. But my point is, I think we want to provide developers some flexibility in being creative and coming up with things like that. And so let's not take away the option that we have right now. The one thing that I'd say is we probably want to, I think we're smarter now than we wrote those subdivision regulations then, so including some references to SEPTED and not wanting to build these kind of fence tunnels that, decrease the feeling of safety as you're going through those trails, those types of things. But that was my point, and let's just kind of keep it the way it is today, and maybe those things come out as developers see some opportunities.
Okay, I think we need to give, after this discussion, some clarification for staff. So let's do a non-binding, just show of hands, generally okay with this, generally not okay with that. Okay, Councilman East, before we do that, is there something that you need to?
Yeah, I just had a question, clarification. In the example you gave, Councilman Rupsis, regarding the little unit around where they put a trail in, does that mean this trail is going to replace the sidewalks that would go on the street?
In that kind of weird concept that I came up with just sitting here for 30 seconds, the streets would be on the perimeter of the outside, right? They'd be providing access to the garages. So I'm not sure what a benefit of a sidewalk along those streets might do, whereas that internal walkway might be much more benefit and usable to the neighborhood than sidewalks along the perimeter. I'm
Yeah,
not saying for
okay.
sure, but that's a case where this
Okay.
might make more sense.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you very much. That clarifies it.
Let's do a basic show of hands. If, I'm going to first ask, you're generally okay with the staff recommendation, then I'll say you oppose the staff recommendation. So first, are you generally in support of the staff recommendation, item number 7? And if, second, if you're opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, very good. Staff, give you that. We'll move on to item 8. This is street lighting. Councilmember Kennedy?
Matt, could you answer just a question for me? On the, on number 8 here, you have that, excuse me. Does new street lighting, number 1, residential light fixture configuration, mercury vapor bulbs or lamps may not be used, residential street lighting height, and exceptions to the requirements of traffic and historic streetlights. Do those 3 meet what Northwest Energy is putting up today?
Yes.
So it's no new costs if they, if the subdivision, if everybody just pays their monthly fee to the utility?
Yeah, if I might reframe that, Northwestern Energy, their program would fall and would fit within this requirement.
Would fit within it? Okay,
yes.
that's all I needed, thank you.
Okay, what do you want to do about street lighting?
Let's go with it.
What's that? Let's have a little more discussion. I need a little more venting on this one.
Well, allow me to step up to the plate.
So Councilmember Rowan,
So
vent away.
I think it's really important that we do this. I think this is good progress. I think it's consistent with established city priorities. I think there is a cost of crime that isn't being calculated here as an offset. And I think that's worthy of considering, even though getting a precise number would be hard to consider. That said, I don't think that what the home builders and others have raised is without merit. I think my preference would be I don't want to see us just stack cost on cost on cost on cost and avoid affordability. I believe that there are places we could find other cost savings. And I would rather do that than miss this opportunity to address lighting. I continue to believe that we have serious problems in the way that we administer our building codes, in the way we do design review. I just think it takes too long, it's too hard, and I think we could get some real cost savings there that would actually offset much of these. And I'd actually like to do that, Chris. I'd like us to get a group together that is the buildings department, some of the trades specifically, so home builders, yes, but the trades like electricians and plumbers and people who are going through the permitting process, and see if we can't start working on some streamlining and efficiencies. Not for nothing, but a few months ago, I guess in June, the Governor's Housing Task Force released their updated recommendations, and there were multiple recommendations on the efficiencies, necessary efficiencies in buildings departments, and how that can contribute to affordability. And so I think we should take a look at those. I think we should look at development in general and try to find a way to do some savings that make this less burdensome, because I think it's really important that we do this. So I would hope that we can move forward on lighting, but I think we should be sensitive to the fact that costs are piling up, and let's find offsets elsewhere.
Okay, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. As you know, I always bring my property tax statement with me for every year. And I have a Billings Light Maintenance District. We pay $13 through Northwest Energy. So if you're going to do lighting, I think it's the best way is to go through Northwest. And they came out and replaced all the lights with LEDs, and they're directional lights instead of the big one that, like he was saying, the big bulb and it goes everywhere. This actually gets the street. And guess what? If it burns out, I call them on the phone and they come and fix it, and I don't pay. I mean, I still only pay $13. So that's not a bad deal if we can get Northwestern. We always say Northwestern Energy.
Okay, for discussion, Councilmember Choi.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. When I attended the July meeting of the